We were shut down for a little too long to be able to schedule that. But Dan and I were just talking that there is a phase 3 coming under development, and I think you guys would really like that. It's more of an advanced class, and it'll be narrowing down the program. So I'm going to go ahead and dismiss that question. Oh, and if you guys are calling in, if you're on the phone, you're going to email me afterwards that your phone number and your email address. The login link you had should have my email address on there, but it's melanie.a.fulsick.barrelero@faa.gov. So you'll see that and we'll get you all that credit. Okay, it is now top of the hour, so I'm going to go ahead and turn the video back on. Hopefully, Dan, you are back. The 2 links that you see there, the QR codes that you can scan, is just a reminder of the 80/20 order and the advisory circular for first responders. So hopefully that will assist you guys. So we're going to continue on here. Now that we are on scene of the crash, now what? So this is my favorite part because that's kind of my background doing this. So who is in charge once we get ourselves onto that crash? 911 is called, we show up on scene, who is here? Well, the first official on scene, police, fire, EMS, okay? Whoever that person is going to start your protocol of what you use in your area, who will be the lead. So you're basically your incident commander. The NTSB can take sometimes 1 to 2 days to show up on scene. So while the NTSB will normally be the lead investigator in charge, we also have a parallel investigator in charge who is the FAA. If it is a high profile crash, like Philly, California, DC, you will see a high profile FAA investigator, and they are from the AVP 110 Washington office. If not, your local FSDO inspector will be the inspector, but also the investigator in charge. So all of the questions, all of the information and data will be shared equally between NTSB and the FAA. And as we mentioned earlier, the military aircraft, once that on-scene commander takes over, they probably will dismiss everybody, and that's because of the proprietary military things that might be in that aircraft. But again, life-saving measures should always be taken, okay? Limit the people that will be on scene. Make sure that only life-saving individuals with proper PPE, personal protective personal protective equipment is on scene. Those individuals must be protected because of carbon fire, the fiber that's out there, smoke, fumes. We just want to keep you safe when you enter the scene. So if you're not prepared, don't go running to the hazard because I promise you there's a lot of it down there. Limit the access to the FAA and TSB and make sure that you ask for credentials. We have seen civilians and the press try to infiltrate scenes and they have gotten in. Make sure that all areas are quarantined and the only folks allowed in show you proper credentials. A little bit easier when a fire truck rolls in and 5 firefighters run off with their gear. Probably don't have to stop each of them and ask them because they're going to be doing the immediate rescue. But when people start coming in, I'll tell you, we did a crash, which I'll show you in a little bit. Even before NTSB showed up, I had an insurance representative at my door, insurance, asking questions about the crash because the insurance wants to know whether they're going to be able to pay. So if they get one snippet of information and I accidentally say, oh my goodness, that pilot looks like he was drunk when he crashed, they will not pay for that crash. So be very, very careful who you let on scene. The same goes with protecting the crash site from the media until all the bodies are removed. I don't want to find out that my best friend is laying in the plane and they're on TV, right? And their body's there. So let's make sure that we cloak the bodies, we protect. As soon as we get on scene, and I should have mentioned this too, as soon as you get on scene and life-saving measures are done, cloak the tail number of that airplane. You're going to see a registration number on the aircraft. Cover it with a tarp, with tape, with spray paint. I don't care what you do. Make sure it is not seen because as soon as media snaps a picture of that tail, it goes viral on the internet. People backtrack what that registration number is, and they will start identifying who might have been injured in that crash, regardless of if it was that person or not. And this is how families can be alerted to fatalities that are not correct. Okay, so something that says, hey, you know, it looks like your brother just died, but it really wasn't him. So please, 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 if you take away one thing from what I teach you today, cloak the tail. That's something we'll do in phase 2 when we go in person, is cloak the tail. Yes, media, my favorite people in the world. They have a job, they have a right, and they are able to film everything and anything they can get access to. But what if we don't give them access? Cloak the area, be very quiet. On your clipboards, don't just leave the notes with the names and stuff on the clipboard. Their cameras with telescopic abilities are able to see what you wrote. Cover it. So your notepad should always be closed or covered. Be very mindful and think if this was your loved one in that aircraft, would you want to find out on the nightly news? I don't think so. Be very careful. Media is sneaky. And again, we have to appreciate them for what they do, but we really need our protection for scenes around them. Now, with scene privacy, you'll see the picture on the left. That's a Citation jet that crashed into a corporate building. The police were excellent. When we started removing those bodies, you can see that black shower curtain. I don't even know what it's called, but they pulled this thing out of their vehicle. They assembled it within minutes, and those policemen held for at least an hour those cloaks closed while we were removing and photographing the bodies. So it was an incredible job, well done by that community. These other pictures remind us that there was a firefighting drone that went up to assess heat sources in the roof, and another media drone interfered with the frequency of the firefighting drone and caused it to crash. So we lost our eyes in the sky doing thermal detection, and the media drone was the one who took that access over. So I sent the police after those people because I think that it was very important. And I'll tell you later what happened, why we needed that drone. So our priorities when we get on scene is, of course, the protection of you first, and then the safety of the survivors, whoever those survivors might be. Bystanders that got struck, pedestrians, people in buildings, families that got struck, the protection of the public, identification of the potential hazardous materials that are around, and of course, after, always the security and preservation of the accident site. Okay. There was a family when the Philadelphia crash happened with the Learjet. Unfortunately, a lot of debris, body stuff actually went through a family that was having their dinner. They were eating at their kitchen table. Luckily, nobody was hurt, but a body penetrated that wall and went in and joined them. So now we're looking at perhaps not injured people, but traumatically injured. Remember, just because they don't appear injured doesn't mean they may not still need some kind of help. So right out of that advisory circular, it is essential that wreckage be protected during rescue operations. However, this is not to imply that during firefighter operations, wreckage may not be disturbed. It just should be kept to a minimum. So these photos that I selected here, you'll see that these firefighters have to put out the active fire. That is their job. I, as the FAA, NTSB, and other personnel like police and EMS, cannot do their job until you do yours. So we will allow you to do it as much as you need to secure the scene, make it safe for entry for the other folks to join in. The picture on the top right, you can clearly see that's a body laying underneath the sheet. So to see something like that, if I can see it in this picture that I found on media, how do you think the families feel about that? Just a thought and consideration when we're moving through preserving the scene and cloaking the tail and other bodies. So the evidence that we want to preserve, if we see it, really some vital things, any kind of logbook that you see, manuals, certificates, perishable goods. So if water, fire, or the environment is exposed to these items, we know there's a less and less chance that they'll be accurate when we open them up. And these do hold really good information. What type of checklist were they using? What operation handbooks were they using? Did they have a registration? So this is really quick data that we would like to collect. So if you see this data, try to collect it. But the other evidence is the aircraft itself and the bodies themselves. Make sure that you're protecting all evidence once you've done your jobs. So before you just go running into the forest to go help these people, consider, right? This aircraft collided in the woods. You can see it was an inferno. It burned, and there's a lot of hazmat as well as biohazard in this scene. It may not look it from here, but biohazard travels very, very far. Blocks, in fact. Philadelphia was 6 blocks of body hazard, bodily fluids that were all over. So what we're going to do is we're going to map that accident scene. If you have the ability to have a drone, that's excellent because it gives you that visual of where the wreckage started and where perhaps we may find those occupants. So I'm going to open up the chat again. Looking at this picture, seeing the direction of the wind, we'll say it was moving westbound. What equipment are you going to use to get in here? And what injuries are you going to prepare for? So go ahead, open up your chat and drop in some answers to those questions. And Dan, if you can call them out, because I just have a split screen.
Yeah, ATVs, brush truck, drone, quads, blunt force trauma,
Yeah.
horses,
Good.
burrows, good one, lacerations.
I love it. So
Yeah.
thinking about this, what do you think that somebody could survive this crash? Could there be live occupants down there? And the answer is, of course there could be. We always go into it thinking that there may have been somebody ejected, somebody that's still trapped in that wreckage. So looking at it, where is the main body of the wreckage? If we bring a helicopter in here, how much of that debris is going to be tossed up? And Dan, as a helicopter pilot, would you accept this mission?
We would, but it would be certainly an offset. We wouldn't go directly to the scene.
Good. So you would drop people off upwind, downwind. What are you thinking?
Oh, it would certainly be upwind, but definitely away from the scene,
Great.
just for multiple factors, preservation of evidence and blowing debris. And then you don't want to shift the fuselage either if somebody's in a precarious situation there still inside the aircraft.
Of course. So really just something for us to think about, having different roles in this, what we would look for. So as far as preserving evidence, all that other debris that was scattered, parts of the wing, parts of the metal, papers, we don't care about that yet. Let's look for those occupants, treat them, and see how easily we can get them out. And it can be very hard. We may actually be carrying people out of there.
Yeah, there's been a lot of comments. A lot of people mentioned K9 teams as well,
Ooh.
because you want to do that secondary survey around the accident scene just in case there was an ejection. So that very, very good point to bring up.
That is. I'm not sure that anyone's brought that up in previous. I don't think they have. We would have seen
Mhm.
that. But it is very interesting to be able to map this and look. In fact, if this was an in-flight breakup, we may find the engine or the heaviest part 10 miles away from this scene. So the heavier the piece, the farther it flings in the sky, and the lighter the debris, the closer to when it started breaking up. We just had one that was in, it was Nashville, somewhere in that area, and it was an inadvertent entry into thunderstorms and icing. And unfortunately, the aircraft exceeded its limitations. The wings tore off first, then it's game over. But we found those wings about 25 miles away from the fuselage and the bodies. And that was incredible to see how far the thermal carried it, because again, they entered the weather and the weather played its own role in transporting those pieces across the environment.
Wow.
Um, I am going to push play if you're ready. Do you want to brief it first and then I'll push play?
Yeah, let me just talk for a moment on this. So this is the Utah National Guard doing some training up at a ski resort. Um, we'll watch the video and then we'll discuss it here shortly. But the one thing I want people to hone in on is the debris path of these two aircraft. Just watch the video, and it's kind of hard to see, but in the lower right hand corner, you can see just how far this debris goes away from the scene.
Do you think it's the 10th Mountain Division? Oh, that one just crashed. Oh, God. Holy shit, it just crashed. Run out. It crashed. It crashed. Oh, no.
So aside from the comedic value to that guy actually saying yelling at his GoPro camera to start recording, but this is actually a pretty big deal. What you're seeing in that video is two helicopters coming in for landing in formation flight. What ultimately came out of this was that they were landing with tailwind, and you can see the second aircraft is that we refer to as Chalk 2 trying to beat the lead aircraft to the ground so that he didn't get into the whiteout. But since they had a tailwind, you could see that cloud of blowing snow actually envelops the lead aircraft. So he lost visibility and impacted the ground. So you can go to the next slide, actually.
I'm just gonna play that last piece. Someone wants to see the last few seconds. I'm just gonna play it one more time, Dan, quickly.
Okay, absolutely.
Oh, that one just crashed. Holy shit, it just crashed. Run out. It crashed.
See the debris there?
It crashed. Oh no.
So if you look upslope in that left-hand picture, the long yellow arrow, that aircraft's land. So not only were they competing with the blowing snow or the whiteout condition, now they're getting pelted with debris from the other aircraft. So both of them were completely destroyed. So looking at this picture, you're one of those bystanders standing there looking uphill at those two aircraft. What are some of the hazards that you're thinking about?
Go ahead and toss them in the snowcats. Fuel and fire, cold exposure, trees, downdrafts, blades running, rotor blades, wind, flying debris, fuel.
Yep. Those are all good points. But what about that slippery, icy slope that they're on? So that uphill aircraft actually began to slide while they were pulling those crew members out of the aircraft. It's a very unstable platform to be working on. So it's just one other thing to consider. And then let's talk about that debris field. So when these incidents occur, you're going to have bystanders approaching you with parts and pieces in their hands, and they're going to say, "Hey, we found this." Well, that needs to be cataloged. First of all, does that person have the appropriate PPE to be handling this or not? The rotor blades of a Black Hawk helicopter, in their stable state, they're not toxic. But the moment that those rotor blades come apart, they're held together. All that carbon fiber is held together with resin. And when those resins come apart, that carbon fiber starts to get atomized. And we'll talk about the size of carbon here in a few, but it's guaranteed to cause cancer. So the first thing you need to do is make sure you have your appropriate protective equipment on and take custody of that material. But you also need to catalog where it was found, how far away, what direction, if it was a quarter mile, 1 mile that way. And all that needs to be diagrammed so that when the FAA and the NTSB arrive on the scene, you can say, yeah, our debris field is this big. And now you're going to shift what's called a cordon, and you're going to cordon the scene and make sure that the scene is surrounded. And each time this person comes up, somebody comes up with debris and they say, hey, this was found 2 miles away. Well, guess what? As an incident commander, now you need to readjust your cordon or your perimeter around the accident based upon that data that's coming in with all these bystanders approaching you. But back to the accident, bringing this back down a notch. So we're looking at the extrication of these pilots and the crew members. You have 2 aircraft that just crashed, a minimum of 4 people on board each aircraft, probably. And we're dealing with icy and snowy conditions. So somebody had mentioned an Arctic Cat, the ski patrol, all these different resources that are available to you to start focusing on that preservation of life and performing those life-saving functions. But I bring this up because the key thing to remember is you have to protect yourself. Yes, that person's having the worst day of their life, and I'm sorry for that, but I'm not going to kill 3 or 4 bystanders because they're standing on top of an unstable aircraft and that aircraft decides to come tumbling down the mountain. So you have to manage the incident within the parameters of safety, and you have to take a step back and have that Goose Fraba moment with yourself to do that analysis, to take it all in, and then think clearly and make those decisions actively.
Well, that's good points there. And then this is, I think you covered it, but this slide.
Oh yeah. So yep, and that's a really good shot. You can see, the predicament that they're in and the actual slope. It's a lot more slopey in this perspective than it was the other one.
And fuel gets everywhere and it makes it so much more slipperier. When I was up in Toronto for the flipped one, there was fuel everywhere. And of course, it was -10 degrees, snow everywhere. And when you walk, it's so slippery. So I think somebody mentioned in here cleats or snowshoes, an excellent idea. If you're a responder that has this in your district, snow, having something like that on your boots will probably really help your safety as well. Having
Mhm.
something like that nearby. Crampons, someone said. That's what they're called,
Yeah.
crampons. If there's any other questions about that, please put comments in the chat and questions in Q&A, and Dan will get to those. We're going to move along to the response operation sequence. This is our ROSC for training. The response, size up, and approach. These are all the different steps that we do when we approach an aircraft accident. This picture, just some takeaways on it, is as we're running through that field, you can see that there's barbed wire, so be sure that you are being very careful with that. That propeller is free. It did pop up out of the mud, but you can see that it could still be live, potentially, and because of damaged wings, there may be fuel leaking out. One thing of note, I do see that the door is hanging on a hinge. As a CFI or flight instructor, I've always taught my students to land when they're having an emergency, engine out, they know they're going to have impact. Unlatch your door, because if the doors remain locked and that airplane crashes, the hinges may actually get bent and there will be no egress. We can kick and kick and kick and that door won't open. But if it's already unlocked, the basically the slipstream across the aircraft will keep the door closed as we're entering the ground terrain. But if we need to get out, we break our arms or we flip over and we're upside down, we can free ourselves. So if you do see a door open when you get to a crash, realize that it may have already been open and that probably didn't cause the crash, but it was something that these pilots prepared for. They knew they were going to be crashing or having a forced landing, and maybe they did that to preserve their own life. So if you see a door open and no occupants, they may have already crawled to safety. And yes, somebody said cover the aircraft numbers. Yes, yes, yes. So if the response is known, the type of aircraft involved will be there. Hey, we have a Piper Warrior, it's coming down. There is somebody on board. There's smoke inhalation, carbon monoxide. How much fuel is on board? We have about 20 gallons on board. Are they injured? Are they not? Where the location is. It happened at New Bedford Airport, or it's 10 miles south on Route 2. Is there cargo that we know about? If there are animals on this, and this was one of these Air Angel flights where they're transporting animals, one of my FAA kind of representatives, he actually transported sea turtles. So they were transporting sea turtles as an Angel flight. They were doing dogs, cats, really anything. So you may have cargo back there that is alive, and know the wind direction and the speed. The direction and speed of the wind is critical because if there is smoke or dust or flames, you're going to see what direction it's traveling in. In this case, we see the propellers that are bent backwards. That means that propeller was spinning upon impact. As the propeller moves, it's showing its indicator. So a signature mark are the curled back blades. And the gear collapse, that probably did it in. So think and consider before you enter the accident scene, what hazmat may be on board. It might be something as simple as they're just carrying acetone. They could have lithium ion batteries, but we know FedEx does take large quantities. They are allowed to. They have a manifest that allows them to take these SDS products. You may not be able to find the manifest, but if you consider that there is no windows on an aircraft, that's usually a cargo transport aircraft. So if there's no windows, or the windows are in this picture of the FedEx, they're clouded over, they're really just blocked by plastic, chances are there is cargo back there. So if you don't need to go into the back of the plane, don't, but you're going to do your once over with your PPE, checking for occupants, checking for other hazards in the back, and leaving this for your hazmat team. You can also always call FedEx once you get to that way and see what was on their manifest, and that manifest can tell you what kind of things they were carrying. A lot of times we do have large cargo carrying batteries, so lithium batteries are allowed to fly under certain permits, and once those catch, they just continue burning. Aircraft structures, so what are aircraft made out of? Aluminum is one of the common ones we see, but aircraft also contain beryllium, steel, wood, Right? So a lot of aircraft, especially home built, have wood spars. They can have epoxied wings, magnesium in the brakes, titanium parts, composite materials, which we'll talk about in a bit, and other materials which can be obviously a hazard to you if they burn, not only in the phase that they are combustible, but also what do they off gas? What are the dangers? Think about your Class D precautions. How do we extinguish this aircraft? And in some cases, is it worth it to extinguish it? If it's going to put us in more danger, we probably are going to let it burn out itself. Believe it or not, there are electric planes. And I don't know if there's electric helicopters yet, but I know for sure there are electric aircraft. No gas, all batteries. And when those catch, you just got to let them burn, right? Like a Prius on the side of the road. Unless you have a ton of Class D material like sand to put it out. So first things first, have the PPE available. Make sure that you guys are wearing your puncture resistant footwear, hazmat suits if you need it, your SCBA if you are trained, definitely gloves because of the bloodborne pathogens that will be present on scene, goggles, respirators, you name it, it should be there. But always think of yourself first. This is the slide we know we get 1,000 comments on, and I'm going to say, what is your policy? I cannot tell you what to do with the phone that is in your pocket. I expect that as a professional, you will have professional maturity not to take pictures and post them on the internet. Pictures that you take, if they are on company or government phones, iPads, laptops, should be provided to the NTSB and the FAA as soon as possible. Advise that you have the photos. I would advise you not to take pictures of the bodies. If we have a fatality and it is an obvious fatality and you know there will be no life-saving measures, that body will remain in place until NTSB clears it with the medical examiner. The medical examiner will be the one that is going to photograph the entire body, where it lays, what signatures we may see on that body, but we do want you to take photos if it's burning, because if it is perishable evidence, we want pictures before it burns to nothing. There might be one little giveaway that helps us with our investigation. Please be respectful when using your phones. I won't tell you what to do on here. I am advising you, please, please be safe when using this. But photos are essential. I have gotten so many wonderful videos from Ring cameras, from bystanders that have helped us solve cases. So if you do, be responsible. I wouldn't want to see it on social media. I worked a crash and there was a crash scene. It was an airplane. You'll see it in a couple pictures. And I went on that night, and by the time we didn't even arrive yet, the FAA, but there was a EMT that took pictures and posted it to the local firefighter forum on Facebook. I saw those pictures as we were driving into the scene. Why was a first responder posting crash photos with tail numbers? So I called her department, and she probably doesn't have a job, but that's what you don't do. Thoughts on this, Dan?
Oh, I agree. I mean, you just have to go into it with the understanding that you may lose your phone for a little bit because it is evidentiary at that point.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So really important for that. So.
Melanie, it looks like Patrick has something to add.
Oh, Pat Ryan, go for it.
Thank you, both of you. There's apparently two people that have their hands up wanting to ask questions. Is it all right?
Nope, they got to put them in Q&A. I did not enable chat on this, speak chat, so they're going to have to put their questions into Q&A, and we will get to those if they don't
Okay,
mind.
very good. Thank you.
All right, thanks. We just don't have the ability to open up the speakers today. I'm sorry. All right, so we are going to be mindful of your approach into the accident scene. Make sure that when you are approaching the aircraft that you approach it from a certain angle, usually 45 degrees is a safe bet. We will be looking for all hazards on the ground when we get into that scene area. You'll see that the bottom left picture, we have an aircraft that landed on the highway, obviously had a fire, looks like it was extinguished, but we do still have cars accessing across the other side of the highway. Should this aircraft have had a ballistic rocket in the back, probably wouldn't be letting cars drive past unless we could secure that system. And again, if there's any way that those cars can see visibly to take pictures of any bodies that are still in that wreckage, probably be very careful. So we have a lot of emergency vehicles, but not really much privacy cloaking going on that right side, short of that one blue emergency vehicle. So we're going to look for clues. When we run into that scene, we are trampling over evidence. And remember, always look up. There are clues when we have off-field landings. Ground scars, impact points up in the trees. You'll see the picture on the right. There's some, I'll kind of take my mouse if you can see it. There's some scarring up in the trees that cuts these branches. This shows that an aircraft came down through these trees with the propeller spinning and it chopped off the side of the tree. So all obvious things, but we don't normally look up. And evidence can be hanging in the trees. So we can see parts or people trapped in trees, especially with skydive accidents. When we have skydivers come down, they're usually hanging from the trees, and that's being suspended in the tree. They could be alive or injured. We have to consider how we are going to stabilize them or the aircraft. So thinking about ground scars and impact points might lead you to where the main wreckage is. When we work crashes, we don't always find all the parts. In-flight breakups, major crashes, we lose wings, we lose engines, and you think it's impossible. How do you lose an engine? It's possible. We still haven't found one in Virginia, and it's been 2.5 years. I was hoping the hunters would find it, but no such luck. So we size up the scene, we determine what actions we're going to do, call in our necessary support vehicles, line up your vehicles in the best place possible, make sure that you have visibility. As soon as we can access this, drivers should exercise caution to make sure that they're not running over parts, pieces, or people. And we want to go upwind and consider escape routes. If people are running out of the aircraft, where are they going? Where can we safely position occupants that we have gotten out to a fresh atmosphere? Normally 45 degrees to the fuselage is safe, and that's also when there are expected munitions on board. For fatalities, I know we have a lot of questions about this. If there happens to be an obvious fatality, somebody that you know is clearly dead in that aircraft, then the FAA or the NTSB must approve the body removal first. That's because we need medical examiners to photograph it in situ and get us that information. But never hold back life-saving efforts if you think there is a chance that that person has a chance to survive. Document everything prior to and after removal. Excuse me. Document where the location of the body was before removal, the condition. Was the body frozen or cyanotic? That will give us clues as if the person was hypoxic in flight. Perhaps they had a pressurization issue. They froze up there. Okay, they were at high altitude and came down, because that's perishable evidence. They may change colors and they might thaw. And also the position prior to the removal. Some key signatures we always look for when you're photographing that body or remind the medical examiner. When we look at the wrists, pilots that fly the aircraft to the ground and hold really firm on that yoke, they normally break their wrists. So we'll see fractured wrists, and that gives us an opportunity to identify which airman in the front seat was piloting the aircraft at the time of impact. Not to say that passengers don't hold on to the yoke, but normally they hold on to other parts of the aircraft if they know that there is going to be a guaranteed forced crash landing. So always look at the wrists, and that's kind of a little tip that we look for to see who the PIC or pilot in command was. You may see these big white boxes show up on scene. These are our TOX boxes. This allows the FAA and the NTSB to get samples of the body once they are under autopsy. And we identify, oh my God, it's like 70,000 different chemicals, the different body parts. We do not do this. So don't pop out your pocket knife and start cutting the body apart. The autopsy medical examiner will put all of the appropriate parts of the person in this kit. It gets shipped to Oklahoma City, to CAMI, the Civil Aeronautical Medical Institute, and they run a plethora of tests, not only looking for alcohol, but if there was a medical, if there was carbon monoxide, what else could have caused this crash? Rule in, rule out medical conditions. So very, very interesting. But if you see this box, an FAA or NTSB person may ask you, law enforcement folks on here, to transport this box to the morgue, wherever the body is being cared for. 80% of people who do impact the ground survive the crash, but they perish in the aftermath. They perish in trapped wreckage, in smoke, in fire. So we always treat for critical burn and smoke injuries fast as we can. The speed of our operation is critical to saving lives. So while it may take the FAA and the NTSB quite a lot of time to get there, you as first responders, as bystanders, so any of my pilots here, bystanders, if you can help get somebody out of that aircraft, the sooner the better, because as they stay in this aircraft and it starts catching on fire or other injuries pertain environmental issues and such, then their chances are diminished. So always we're going to attack or enter the scene, tail, nose, or side, upwind, uphill if possible. If it is on fire, considering using hand lines instead of your snozzle truck to drive in. And with rescue, never ever go into these aircraft by yourself. 2 rescue personnel should always be used at a single entry point in our large aircraft. And especially on small aircraft, we always want at least 2 points to know that somebody is not operating a portion of the aircraft while I don't know what they're doing. So someone climbs inside the flight deck and they start hitting switches and they inadvertently start up a propeller that I'm standing underneath. That's not good. So make sure that teams are communicating. Don't just go in there and do whatever you want. Communicate, communicate. Crew resource management. And always remove victims immediately to a bearable atmosphere. Get them out of the toxic atmosphere. Get them on oxygen and in an ambulance as fast as you can. A stabilization of small aircraft in trees. This is really cool. I've been teaching this class for what seems like 100 years and I love it. And so this slide is very chaotic because every time I teach, somebody tosses new ideas into the chat and I just keep putting it into this slide. You have to be creative. There is not a one size fits all. Hey, there's an airplane in a tree. How do I stabilize it? Every department on here has different equipment. You have different resources. You have different techniques, tools, training, finances. So come up with an idea of what your department would use. Do you have the ability to have a cherry picker service, maybe a wood service that comes in and can assist you? Do you have a utility truck that you're using in your fire department? Can you use pulleys, diaper slings, cranes? Have we considered helicopters? Is it safe? So all of these things to remember that you're going to consider the area, stabilize the aircraft around the strong points, so the base of the root of the wing, also around the root of the tail, in front of the cockpit where the engine is, where the firewall is, but be cautious because if you choose any kind of airborne rescue or treatment above top, the downwash or the pressures from up top could collapse that aircraft to the ground. So don't put yourself right underneath the aircraft, and I'm going to go ahead and switch slides quickly. This aircraft is suspended in the tree. I wouldn't stand underneath this plane because all it takes is one blow of the wind, one snapped twig, CG to shift, and this aircraft could topple to the ground and hurt myself or bystanders or my fire truck. I don't think I want this light sport sitting there. So this aircraft is one that lost its engine, landed into a group of trees. These folks lived, but they were suspended up in the trees. So the fire chief, his idea was we strung some ropes through the trees with a Stokes basket, and we were able to lower the patients down to the ground and get them out of harm's way. So a very clever way that this chief was able to think as far as stabilizing the aircraft. Maybe, later on they can throw some ropes around it and tie it to the tree. That way we at least can get evidential pictures and we'll be able to find a nice secure way to get it out. I'm guessing the best way here would be some kind of a winch, some kind of a lift that might be able to secure it in a sling and lower it to the ground. But some salvage companies would come here, take the wings off, and lower the rest down by rope. There's no one size fits all. So go ahead and throw ideas in the chat if you know what your department would do. But if you don't know, add this to your safety briefing at your next monthly meeting and think about what tools and equipment you folks have in your area. This is the crash I told you about that came through the trees. So this aircraft entered some wind shear. They took off kind of wrong direction and ended up entering the treetops. Here behind it, hopefully you can see my mouse, you can see the sheared off trees and leaves. The aircraft entered and the propeller was spinning all the way to the ground. Over here, over this gentleman's head, you can see where it cut the tree and caused damage. The only reason that this engine didn't end up through the pilot's lap is because the tail got tangled in the vines of Connecticut. So very, very deep in here. And it acted like a slinky and it stopped the aircraft from hitting the tree. So we say that he survived by 2 inches. And this is the picture that was up on social media before we arrived on scene, something very similar to this. But this is our salvage expert up here in the New England area. He was able to secure it with ropes, brace it, so you guys know that you have the ability to brace the aircraft, stabilize it, and when we're ready, we're going to go ahead and release the brace, take the ropes, and pull the aircraft down to its wheels so then we can take it out of the forest. So really a great job well done here. The pilot did survive. He was 82 years old and had the gumption after he crashed to put a little twig into his fuel vent because he noticed it was dripping fuel. So he wandered out of the woods on his own, a little disoriented, but still it was a Boy Scout camp. So the Boy Scout leaders saw him and then got him medical treatment. So such an interesting crash for this, but thankfully he was all right. But 82, good on him. Aircraft that present with gear, we were talking about bracing, must be braced. Do not let this slip. And honestly, brace all aircraft. If you don't know if that gear is retractable, just consider that perhaps the struts are damaged. In this case, I see a gentleman, a firefighter in the back here in a hat. He has his head underneath the elevator of the aircraft. If this gear gave out on the left wing, that tail is going to come slamming down and he's going to have a headache for a little bit. The other firefighters, they're in a variety of different positions here. We don't know if this aircraft has hazards leaking out of it, but I think it could be done a little better. Not a really pretty picture, and you see what appears to be line services, the gentleman in the red shirt reaching through the back of the tail. Chances are he is trying to deactivate the ELT, which is going off. That's our emergency locator transmitter. It makes this whooping sound so people can find us if we enter the water, if we have a hard landing, or if we're having an emergency. So chances are he's reaching back there, and then there's a bucket to catch some fuel. So consider it, but I would like to see bracing blocks, airbags, something to stabilize this aircraft and talk about our, communication, our crew resources here. Don't stand under the tail just because it's raining out. You have a hat. It's okay to get wet. Dan, I'm going to turn this one over to you.
That previous one always cracks me up.
This one?
So it's just that whole scenario is just funny. So, all right, next slide. Sorry.
It's okay.
All right, so here we are. You arrive on the scene of a helicopter crash, and if you look in the background, we talked about taking in that macro before you fixate on the micro. There's a fire burning in the background. Well, the aircraft's not burned up, so that leads me to believe that this helicopter was part of that firefighting effort in one capacity or another. So there's just a significant amount of hazards associated with responding to an incident like this. We would call this an EWI, or an incident within an incident. So you can't take your eyes off the big picture of, hey, there's still a forest fire going on, or a brush fire or wildland fire going on. Now we have to deal with this problem in the midst of the bigger problem. So how are you going to get all of the tools necessary to extricate someone out of this accident? It's clearly remote. I'm not sure how long this state trooper spent hiking into it, or if he was even involved in the accident, but you're going to need a lot of heavy equipment, a lot of big stuff. So that's really this whole slide. The whole purpose of this is just to generate that thought process. Do you have anything else to add on that one?
Yeah, so seeing the fire that could be still burning in the back, of course, a big problem. But, with this one, we just wanted to kind of express the fact that there is scarring on the trees, so we can see some of that. What are they looking at? And then would you fly in another helicopter for hoist rescue here? So just kind of discussing if that's an option or not.
Right. Yeah, I mean, in this case, probably not a viable option as far as doing a hoist rescue. Maybe, again, like that slide earlier, it would be an offset infiltration for paramedics to get into this scene to perform that extrication and rescue. But it's definitely a challenge to do a hoist rescue with a fire burning in proximity to that, just because of blowing ash and embers, and then also the debris from the accident and disturbing evidentiary stuff with the accident.
Right, and being able to see this, right, this is where you can kind of see the sheriff is holding a cell phone, and I'm hoping he's taking pictures because it could be perishable. If we are not able to bring in other firecraft to put out that brush fire, I'm thinking that we could lose this whole structure into the fire, including bodies that may not have been removed yet. So this is something that it just photos will tell a million stories, right? Just take those photos because if that fire moves and everybody has to evacuate the scene, now we're thinking, oh gosh, we probably should have, because then what is left when I get there is just a skeleton of not
Right.
the people, but the skeleton of the aircraft, and that won't be the best evidence.
Yeah.
Although the cables and conduits, we should still have some continuity there if it was still present.
Yeah. So water ditching. Um, Airplanes and helicopters crash differently in the water. No two accidents are the same. And the one thing that is the same with all of them is that aircraft don't crash pretty. So I always ask people when I'm teaching underwater egress, how long do you have to get out of this aircraft? And the answer is the rest of your life. So one thing that's inherent with helicopters is all of the weight is up top. You have the engine, that massive rotor system, a huge transmission. So all that weight is up top. So when helicopters go in the water, they rotate upside down. Airplanes, if they do a nice flat landing, they tend to do really well. Just like that aircraft in the middle, kind of just right side up before they sink, and they kind of just will go nose down, and then depending on what's in the nose, and then they sink once they become compromised, and all those voids holding air tend to fill with water, and then they'll start the sinking process. But if you respond to these in the water, this is where that aircraft knowledge needs to come into play. Hey, is this a high capacity aircraft? How many people could possibly be in the water? What are our currents? What are we looking at for water temperature? How far away are these people going to drift away from the incident? People with habitual overwater missions will carry overwater equipment. One of the examples down below in that bottom right-hand picture is a Winslow rescue raft or survival raft. You can see on the front of that raft, there's a small ladder. It's just a little webbing type ladder to climb into the raft. Those bags at the bottom, it looks like little squares or cubes. Those are actually meant for ballast. For one, it stabilizes the raft, keeps it from flipping over, especially when occupants are climbing in and out of it. But it also slows it down because once that raft is deployed, it becomes a wind signature. So the raft is actually higher than the people in the water. And if you deploy it and you're not holding on, that thing's off to the races and you're never going to catch it, especially if you're in cold water. And so those ballast bags are meant to kind of slow it down and prevent the drift so that you're not drifting an excessive amount away from your crash debris. Because when we're searching for victims of an airplane crash from the air, we're looking for that debris field. We're looking for the sheen of fluids from the aircraft. And that will always lead us to the wreckage or to the victims, hopefully. One thing that I do want to remind people of is a phenomenon called post-rescue decomp. And we notice this a lot with water rescues because people are in this cool environment and we deviate away from that 98.6 or 98.7 core body temperature. We get into water it can be slightly cooler or much cooler than our temperatures. So the body tends to compensate. And one thing we notice is when we pull these people into our aircraft or onto a boat or whatever rescue modality we're using, they get on board and they in their mind, they're going, oh, thank God I'm rescued. And so once they have that realization that they've been rescued, then their body eases up on that compensation and they decompensate. So the person could be looking good. They don't have any scratches or bruises or anything. And you put a blanket around them or a beach towel and hey, you okay? And you turn your back and when you look back at them again, they're unconscious. And that's because of that rapid decomposition. So they're not your care of that person once you pull them out of that environment and you start the warming process and your assessment, your care of them does not end until you hand them off to a higher echelon of care, meaning the hospital or paramedics or anyone else that can manage that patient appropriately. So never take your eyes off them.
And water ditching is quite survivable. A lot of comments coming in about this. And aircraft can flip, but they also don't have to flip. Just because they have fixed gear, there is a very finite way to land it. And once you start learning to fly seaplanes, I always recommend every pilot take a couple seaplane lessons, because even though your aircraft is not a seaplane, I guarantee you can still land that aircraft on its wheels on the water and belly flop its tail in and plunk the nose down. It doesn't always have to. So you stall it over the water. And a lot of times water is our only option to land. There is no other option when we're over the water. And it may be the safest option if my choice is rugged terrain or a mountain lake. Chances are I will try to take my chances landing in that lake. So we can address that off there, but thank you, Dan, on that one.
Yep.
I guess this is kind of like coming up to the break, but this is a crash that I worked, just something that was local. This pilot did land this aircraft successfully, just like this. He lost his engine. Unfortunately, what we figured out was it was a brand new aircraft to him. When he changed his fuel tanks in this aircraft, he didn't change it all the way. It was almost like a kind of a half turn, so the baffles didn't line up, and he suffocated his engine. That's it. So he noticed that his engine was failing. His only option was a busy city with big buildings or the river. And he landed in the river. I wouldn't say it was that shallow, but it was about 10, 12 feet, and there were protected oyster beds. So he landed on all the oysters. We were able to get Sea Tow to come. They put airbags around the wings. They floated the aircraft out. The pilot, his wife, and his giant Great Dane dog had to swim out to shore for safety, but the dog didn't know how to swim, so he had to carry his Great Dane, and his name was Carl, and everybody was fine. So, and the cute part of the story is after I was interviewing Carl, they noticed like he was acting kind of weird, but they remembered the reason he couldn't answer my questions. They pull up his big ear and he had in earbuds. So there's actually doggy earbuds for when they fly. And so Carl couldn't hear my questions, but he recovered quite well. And we got this aircraft up and out after over a day of leaking fluids over the oysters. Long story, but unfortunately, who pays the bill at midnight when nobody knows if the insurance will pay for it? So we had to leave the aircraft, unfortunately, floating in the water all night until we got confirmation, because there was no harm to people. The occupants were already rescued. Such a story. Just a quick story. You guys can put some things in the chat here as we come up towards our break, but let's look at this photograph. Let's see where this aircraft entered. So did this aircraft enter from the left or the right of the picture? And why did it enter and it's facing the opposite direction? Did the fire department do a proper job securing the scene? Did they brace it properly? Throw some stuff in the comments. So we're looking at this crash site. You pull up on this scene. You're second to scene because the fire department showed up first. Looks like right. Yep. Okay, to the right. Exactly. So the aircraft came towards us, so as if it was coming towards our faces. You can see that the right wing struck the trees, broke the branches off, probably took out part of that porta potty. And then as it struck the tree, it cartwheeled and spun around on its belly, and now it's facing 180 degrees back to where it entered. Fuel has spilled out all over that grass because of the breached wings, and the position of where the aircraft is looks like it's properly braced. There is some cribbing there by the right wing, and if you see right underneath where it says the number 3, you can see this small yellow bar. I believe that that is more. However, I probably would have done a little more support on the tail. The chair has been removed from the aircraft, which means that's how they tried to get the occupant out of here. My concerns: we have this guy with a fanny pack. I'm not really sure what he's doing there, but he probably shouldn't be there. We do have some security tape, but it's not being monitored. I don't see any police presence or fire. It's a very empty scene, but there's a lot of perishable and good evidence here. So I don't want the guy with the fanny pack photographing this. I don't want other golfers cruising through this scene. Yeah, and cloak the tail number. Why isn't it covered? Because they didn't take this class, that's why. But lots of bits and pieces all over the ground, and I know that you guys would do very well on this scene because I think you put some good stuff in the chat. And this is our kind of just our quick Alaska chat. This aircraft was fully loaded. He was ready to go up, fly to his island where he's building a house. And sadly, the aircraft didn't make it far off of the runway. Ended up crash landing here right off of the parking lot. And there were a lot of people around because what you don't see is there's like a beach coastal area right where you would be sitting looking at this presentation. So throw in the chat what you are thinking about right now. So you show up and this is the group of bystanders that you see. So we see them holding the tail up, the wing up. but there's a live fire. Chances are
Fire. Yeah.
fire. Yeah, there is what appears to be a police officer here. He's got his hand on his belt, and he's looking at the wreckage. So in this picture, just so you know what is happening, is they are egressing out people. There were people trapped, so they're trying to get them out of the aircraft. Lots of debris around. But what else is in the background? What else are we thinking about now? Now we don't just have an aircraft that crashed with occupants that are trapped. We have a fully involved fire on a structure. Did anybody evacuate that house? Why is there a army guy standing there with a police officer with a little fire extinguisher? That's not going to do anything. Something's better than nothing, but nobody here has PPE. Who is getting burned? Who is taking smoke? And why is there like a governor and a fisherman all the way to the right? Like, what are they doing? There's so much going on here. And this plane is now actively burning. I want to know where the occupants are. I need to know that that house is clear. So this is going to take a lot of effort to scramble those bystanders. Instead of just standing, go check the front of the house, get people out, right? All things that we would do with our loud, authoritative voice. And after they decided to do all that, here is our picture, okay? So that wood that you see did not come from the house. This aircraft was transporting lumber and gasoline with other powered equipment in the back with a child in here, all heading out. Their CG was off. It was center of gravity. It was too heavy. They couldn't make the lift, and this was all combustible in the back. So nothing that was secure. And I'm sure when they took off, they had a massive shift of that weight towards the back of the aircraft, tossing them off and prohibiting them from safe flight. So all things to consider that, yes, we just got the 911 call that there's a crash, but by golly, look what's inside it. Lumber, children, bystanders. How many ambulances would you need? And then let's look at the house. How many occupants or people were trapped in there that might have been injured? So job well done in the end, but I think that a lot of this could have been fixed.
And they all survived that, right?
Yes, they did. Yes, in that case, I believe. Okay, we are at the 5-minute mark. Take your 5 minutes, come back at the top of the hour. I will go through the questions and just answer as many as I can. So if you asked a question, I will stay, but otherwise, please feel free to go take your breaks and come back at the top of the hour. Will I be covering requesting an emergency TFR? The answer is yes. I will tell you how to do that. If you don't know, you will simply just contact the ROC, that number I gave you. Tell them that you need a TFR. They are able to communicate with ATC in your local area. They'll either provide you a phone number or they'll coordinate that setup. And the ROC or the WOC normally stay on the phone with you while they're making the other calls. So they won't just disconnect, and they'll help guide you through that process. And it's a temporary flight restriction. So we, that crash that you saw where he entered the trees, the 82-year-old, we actually put a preventative TFR over that. So other aircraft couldn't fly until we were done. And it, again, if it was smoke or fire, I wouldn't want people going through that. Let's see. Show the screen with the aircraft number and info. And I break. Okay, so break, yes. We're getting to the bottom, guys. We have like 2 hours left. Let's see. This class is 4 hours. You do have to stay for the full 4 hours. That's what you signed up for. I'm sorry. I cannot give partial credit. Being a part of first responder is taking into account what you have, what is available, and what can be done to help. Even if I do not have full PPE, I'd still go in and attempt to help. The answer is yes, but that is your decision. Each first responder, depending on what their choice is, makes that decision. And it's the same way we tell people, you don't have to help. We would love if you helped, but it's not required. I would never want to see a responder put themselves in danger to either catch a bloodborne pathogen or injure themselves where they don't get there. So yeah, it's a risk reward scale. What are you willing to enter? And there are a lot of times that I still take risks on things, working even in the EMS field. I probably shouldn't, but a child is never an exception for me. If I know a child is in danger, that's the first thing that I respond to, because I just think that they still have a whole big life to live. And I think that's when people say, oh, I don't have a CPR mask to give CPR to a child. I wouldn't worry about contracting a disease from them. I'd be more worried about someone giving the child a disease. So I'll go ahead and clear that one. Can I show the aircraft? Yes. I hope, Mark, that is a picture that can help you there. You guys can look up the case here. It's I believe it's November 59352. I don't have all the details on it, right? I don't want to get into case studies right here, but I do hope that if you look at NTSB final reports, it will tell you the layout of things. But what we like to look at is the pictures and how the scenario kind of unfolded. Yeah, and if you guys have, so you do have to stay for the full 4 hours, but I do accept up to like 15-minute breaks in between. So if you only have 4 hours and 45 minutes logged, I'm sorry, 3 hours and 45 minutes logged, I still give you full credit. And that's because we know that there's IT issues. So don't worry about if you had to log off for sound issues. Totally gotcha. And then this picture, I just wish I was there camping right now. I think that would be such a nice way to spend the rest of my week. Let's see what else we have. For pilot owners, do we know if the recent CARES aircraft registration privacy program proving itself useful for blocking the N number to look up control? Yes and no. It has done very well for protecting FlightAware 24, things like that. But we, as the FAA, we still have the ability to look up information. ADSB is that's kind of your tattletale. So we're still able to pull that data up. I hope that helps answer your question. And we're coming up on the top of the hour again. That break went fast. There you are, Dan. I answered most of the questions, so I felt like I could get through that one because I know that you're teaching the next chunk. So you are up. Welcome back,
Awesome.
everybody.
All right. So fuel locations on aircraft. Typically, well, always, the fuel cells are in line to maintain center of balance with aircraft because that is one of the primary considerations. As you burn fuel, then that keeps the aircraft in balance. On the blue aircraft there in the center picture, you can see there's multiple locations for each individual fuel cell. On top of the aircraft, you'll see caps. In the top left of this picture, you'll see the different styles of fuel caps on top of the wings. And keep in mind, for that high wing aircraft, the fuel, it could be above you while you're conducting whatever operation it is around that aircraft. So fuel drains, those little T looking devices there, those are meant for us to take fuel samples. So you just plunge upward on that or rotate and then press upward on those. And you'll fill a clear jar and you can look at it and see if there's water or particulates in your fuel. And that's at the bottom underside of those fuel cells, so that anything that's in the fuel drains to the bottom of it, and we're draining what's called the sump and to do that analysis on the fuel.
So if they walk up and they see fuel just pouring out of this, what do you suggest that they do?
Well, for one, containment on the ground, but also up with those devices, you can actually grab them and turn them, and sometimes that'll shut it off because sometimes they inadvertently get bumped and opened. Okay, helicopters, the rotor system, that top left picture, you can see the rotor blades coming off. That's the vertical piece is called the mast, and that happens to be our center point on helicopters. So if you were to put a hook on top of that rotor system and pick the aircraft up, it would be perfectly balanced, and that's the center of balance of the aircraft. So we try to keep those fuel cells in as close proximity as possible to that rotor system to maintain that center of balance. Some aircraft, like that A-Star in the middle, that the top middle picture, that's an actual agricultural plastic tank. They're not crash-worthy. So A-Stars, they're now being fitted with crash-worthy fuel cells, but older model aircraft have these tanks that rupture on impact. So post-crash fires, or if the engine's running in an accident, they typically they have the tendency to catch on fire. The Black Hawk down below, that medevac helicopter, those aircraft have self-sealing fuel cells. So it's actually got a layer in there between the bladder and the exterior of it. And it's designed that if it takes a bullet, and that material, when it comes in contact with fuel, it forms a gel and will seal the tank. So you don't typically have as much fuel pouring out of those military type aircraft as you would civilian aircraft. Some cells are stacked, some cells are interconnected, and There's just a lot of different types of fuel, but just understand that the fuel is going to be in proximity to that rotor system. So we've talked about flashpoint and auto ignition a little bit, and you've seen those on the slides previously. So what we're talking about with a flashpoint is the fuel has to be heated up to a certain point for it to ignite. And different types of fuels, from ethanol all the way down to biodiesel in terms of volatility, you see where your jet fuel falls. It's kind of in the middle. So it's not a super volatile fuel, but what we're worried about in an accident sequence is the auto ignition temperature. So we have an aircraft that's been running for a little while. It now has an accident and the fuel spills up to those hot metal surfaces. That's going to be an auto ignition. So if you have an engine exhaust, you look at for our jet fuels and those aviation fuels, 410 degrees. Well, our engines are burning at 800 degrees. So if you think about that, all those hot metals laying there, when that fuel comes in contact with it, you have that auto ignition. So we're so far beyond the flash point, which is what the engines use. They heat the fuel up and it gets to that above 100 degrees, and then it ignites. Those igniters start doing their job to fire it off and make the engine function. Um, you just have this pool of fuel coming up and coming in contact with those hot surfaces. You can have that auto ignition. Fuel quantities we touched on a little bit, but you can see in that left diagram all the way from the Airbus 380 at 81,000 gallons of fuel. That's 500,000 pounds of fuel on board that aircraft, all the way down to your helicopters, which, you know, your Bell 412 with 330 gallons or a Black Hawk helicopter with 360 gallons. So a wide variation of quantities of fuel, but it's definitely something to keep in mind. If you see fuels coming around and you know that engine's still hot, that you're not out of the danger zone.
Right. And, to touch on this, I know it's probably fresh in everyone's mind because it was the latest worst one was the UPS crash that just happened. And what we saw as far as when it burned and it burned because it was heavy and it was ready for departure to like Hawaii. So it had so much fuel on board that that fuel just continued to burn. And we look at similar types of aircraft, how many gallons, well exceeding close to 50,000 gallons that can be on board. That's a lot, and it's a lot of weight, and it's hot, very, very hot.
Yeah. So other fluids, there's just so many fluids with aircraft. If you look at that picture there, you see the fluids on the ground, and that's something to note when you arrive on the scene. If there's no fire, and as you're performing your life-saving functions, those things get slippery. But one thing to note too is the color of the fluid that's on the ground, because as the incident progresses, those fluids could change color. They become contaminated by dirt or get absorbed into the ground. It's imperative to make note of those details. Hey, there was red fluid all over the ground. Well, hey, now your investigators are going to start thinking, well, maybe they had a hydraulics failure, or a line was broken, a line was cut. So those little tiny details are those nuggets of investigative information that develop the full picture for these agencies that are responding. You have oil in the engines, you have hydraulic fluids that manage our power steering with flight controls, and then you also have batteries, which are just ultra corrosive lead acids and fluids contained within those batteries. So other chemicals, TKS, which is actually ethylene glycol. That's a de-icing agent. It's also, so the whole purpose of, or the way TKS functions is it removes moisture from air. And it is a significant inhalation hazard because you can imagine if you inhale it and it's removing moisture, it's going to dry your lungs out. So it's extremely dangerous. It also causes CNS problems and central nervous system problems, and it can damage your kidneys and other organs. So it's a very, very dangerous chemical. The cap is marked with that. You see that red label around the cap there. So that's intended so that people don't inadvertently put fuel in there into the TKS system. But you'll find these systems on the leading edge of wings and around props and windshields and your tail surfaces.
And definitely not just on the big aircraft. This is also on your smaller Cirrus aircraft. So we have TKS on even your small single engine aircraft as well.
Yeah. And one thing I don't think I talked to, or I didn't mention about on the previous slide with your hydraulic fluids with Skydraw. It's a hydraulic fluid, but it's a specific hydraulic fluid that's designed to prevent expansion and contraction based on temperature and altitudes. It's consistent so that you have the same flight control response regardless of altitude and temperature that you're working on. If it has Skydraw, it's a very corrosive hydraulic fluid. It actually removes paint from aircraft, and you'll see the hydraulic overflow or over pressurization lines. The paint around those lines gets corroded off. Aircraft equipped with Skydraw, excuse me, will have a purple label, and that's how you'll know that that corrosive hydraulic fluid is installed in the aircraft. All right, so potassium permanganate. And during firefighting efforts, there are times where we will use potassium permanganate, these plastic spheres, to light backfires. So we fight fire with fire. If the aircraft does have these loaders on board, the hazards associated with them is you have this potassium permanganate sphere. It's just a ping pong ball that has this powder inside of it. Well, when it goes into the loader, it's actually injected with the ethylene glycol, and that chemical reaction starts to happen inside the container, but nothing happens until we dispense it. It impacts the ground and breaks. Now that it's exposed to the air, it oxidizes, and through that oxidization process, they catch on fire. So you can imagine if this loader were to fall out or something were to happen with the aircraft that's flying it, and you have all these ping pong balls all around, you don't know which one of those has been injected with that ethylene glycol. Or if the ethylene glycol has ruptured and now you have that fluid on the ground and you're stepping on all these little ping pong balls, you're going to induce a fire. So that's one hazard to consider. With that drone, I would stay away from that thing, just because that thing is bringing its own hazard to the fight. If one goes down, you see those ping pong balls everywhere, rope it off and keep people away, because you just don't know which one of those has been injected or activated.
Guess that brings us to hot air balloons, huh?
Sure does.
We love these. So hot air balloons are really great. I will say that after I watched the most recent, I think it was Brazil video that I saw of that thing tumbling out of the sky, I've made a promise I probably will never get in one. But they can burn up to 18 million BTU an hour, which is 600 gas grills at the same time. Some of them have dual burners, and the flames can reach over 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Inside that basket, they normally carry 10 to 60 pounds of propane in the basket with the passengers, because where else are we going to put it? Similar to the same that you use when you turn on your propane grill, you're going to go ahead, unscrew them, allow that fuel to move its way up into the burner, and then the burner will ignite. And that's the bottom picture, how we can go ahead and the heat, the thermal energy will open up that canopy and eventually rise that basket to the sky. Now, what are some things that you're thinking about as this comes down? Of course, they get tangled in wires, so be sure that if it is high power or low power tension lines, that you are contacting the electrical services to have that shut down. You don't want to get electrocuted. As long as the passengers are in the basket and there is no contact making that short, they will not get electrocuted. They can hang off of the wires. However, they tend to catch on fire and then it'll collapse to the ground. Not the basket, I'm sorry, the canopy can catch on fire. Now, other things to think of is when you see the pilot, the way to identify the pilot in the balloons, they normally wear gloves, and those gloves, they will write their blood type on. So it is common in the balloon industry that they write blood types on their gloves. So just a little fun fact, if you see a balloon down and you see those gloves, just be cautious. Knowing from experience, I was able to take a nice lesson in these, and the gentleman had me touch right where you see the flames coming out shortly after he extinguished it, and it was cool to the touch. So you think that it does get very hot in some of those parts. It does not. So it's good to know that if you accidentally bump it, you're not going to have a 2,000 degree burn, but some areas can get up to 2,000 degrees. So just be cautious about that. Let's see. All right, so we're going to go into a bit of an accident overview. This is one thing. This is a little case study. This helps us move through our CEU accreditation. So we'll talk about this, and I want you guys to pull up your chat again so you can put some questions in it. This aircraft was a Cessna 560, so an Excel, and it had 2.5 people in the back and 1 person in the front. Why do I say 2.5? Because mom was 7 months pregnant, so it was still a viable fetus inside of her. They departed a very small airport and unfortunately ended up taking off, not getting the lift they needed. They struck a telephone pole, inverted, and on its roof impacted the grass and slid into the side of the Trump building, Trump with an F, not with a P, and the building caught on fire as well. So it was a big inferno that you can see on the top left picture. When I got deployed to this, I was about 30 minutes away, so I was able to get to the crash while it was still smoking, and we found out very quickly kind of some of the evidence that we had. So going into the chat box, you pull up to scene and you are the firefighters or the EMS or the police. What are your first thoughts? You see the picture on the top left. Yeah, how many people are in the building? What was being manufactured? Great. Yes, building collapse. How many people? What PPE do I have? All good thoughts. So this is what we go in thinking. So of course, as the FAA, I can't go running into the scene when it's hot and smoking. I need to wait. Okay, so we need to wait. And the fire department did an excellent job. So about an hour later, we were able to start collecting evidence. But what we did is where you see the grass and that a main impact point on the picture to the right, there was no fire there. So we were able to walk around and collect all the evidence that was down on the ground. So we mapped it out. We kind of created a grid pattern and identified what parts and pieces of the plane were there. We walked further down the street. We looked at the telephone pole it struck. And then we were able to kind of get some evidence until we walked in. So I'm going to leave this picture up to show you the top. Earlier, I spoke about a drone that was being used by the fire department and the press drone that was disabled it, basically. On the top of that roof where they're spraying water, it is a large atrium and it was huge glass. So as we were walking in now looking for the occupants in this crash, large glass was over our head. We didn't think about it. So right here we are, we're still, FAA fire. Nobody was thinking that this glass was now shattering pieces that were probably the size of me that could come down. So once we're in there, they kick us back out, they break all the glass down. We think that the problem is solved. We continue inside the building, and a short while later, we see smoke. The ceiling reignited. So now we have a fire happening. We had to again egress looking for those bodies and have them extinguish the roof. So had we had the drone with those heat-seeking properties, we probably would have known that there were still hot spots that were reigniting. So things that, again, do we still make mistakes? The answer is yes. So I'll move a little closer to the picture. So now you can have a glimpse of where the tail is and where those bodies might be. So we know that we are looking for, at minimum, 2 pilots and somebody in the back because we knew that 2 people, due to video surveillance, were in the back. Now, the size of this aircraft, if you saw from the first slide here, the pilots will be up front. They were easy to find because they were at the very beginning of the crash. We could find their bodies, but where would these people sit? And thinking about the inside of an aircraft, know the schematics of an aircraft. You can easily find all floor plans of planes, so their breakdown of what they are, on many websites. And when we are done with this training, when I send you your completion certificate, I am going to add a link to an extremely helpful guide that lists almost every single aircraft you'll see in North America. You'll click on it and it will show you the floor plan and where you might consider finding people, structures, oxygen bottles, things like that, all inside the aircraft. So have that available on your iPad, pull it up, quick link, hey, here's the tail number, I cross-Googled it, oops, it's a Citations Excel. Boop, pull up that schematic, and now you're gonna have a full layout. So the biggest concerns here that we're looking at is how do we find the bodies? How do we cloak this from the press? And again, what other hazards are you thinking about? So go ahead and if you want to put in the chat, what other things are you now considering once we have the scene stable? Different configurations, yes. Power lines, so being able to work around that, yes. So this case is officially closed, so we can talk about it now. What happened? This aircraft taxied out on an uncontrolled field, meaning there was no aircraft tower. They were waiting for their clearance. When they pulled onto the runway to wait, they set the parking brake. And then they began having a conversation. And they then forgot to undo their parking brake. This particular aircraft did not have an annunciator light, which would have identified that the parking brake was still on. When they got their clearance, they accelerated full thrust. The aircraft skidded its way down the runway and they did not notice it in time. and it still overpowered the braking system until it hit where the tarmac dropped into the grass. The aircraft dropped into that grass, and it got just enough lift and thrust at that point to basically take off like a homesick angel. But right in front of the runway, there is a telephone pole. It just didn't have enough lift. The belly hit that pole, flipped over, and the rest is history. So sadly, the two pilots lost their lives, a husband and wife who were both doctors, and a pregnant mom left behind a 2-year-old son at home. A very tragic case to say, why didn't we use our checklist? All things that we investigated through this. So there's always so many different parts to an accident scene, but so much that you can do as responders to secure that scene, get those people out, and preserve that area from the media. So survival removal is not always easy. That top wreckage you see is that crash. That's the airplane. How do we get the people out of that folded fuselage? And in the back of the fuselage, the wings wrapped around it. So we had to find a way to pry the wings open, peel open that cabin, and the people were where we expected them to be. So it's not always straightforward. If they're hanging in wires, how do we get them down? They're in a tree. We talked about a stabilization, and yay, winter is coming. Alton Bay. What if it's not really hard yet with the ice and somebody ends up landing on that lake and they're like that? How do I get out on the ice safely to save or rescue these people who could be drowning, trapped, and of course succumbing to their injuries in the environment? So be prepared. Pay attention to the egress areas where people might be egressing themselves out of. Learn to identify hazardous areas and materials. And Dan, let's talk about preparing inexperienced crew of potential hazards.
So, yeah, I mean, before anybody flies with us, work-wise, we do an extensive passenger briefing that encompasses approaching and departing the aircraft, but as well as emergency exits and fire extinguishers, first aid kits, all those things. But with that helicopter there, the one thing I want to kind of highlight with that, there's 11 firefighters getting on board that aircraft in this picture. I talked about during the water segment, the fact that helicopters are heavy up top. So one hazard with those aircraft on impact, if they have what's defined as a hard landing, all that weight is translated down through the aircraft, and above that cabin where all those passengers are is a giant, we call it a main module, but it's a transmission that turns the giant fan. That's a lot of weight. They actually install those with a crane. So for the first responders in the room, think about that aircraft having a hard landing, that transmission coming down through the cabin and pinning those occupants inside the aircraft. So no two extrications are the same. So it's going to be a very slow and deliberate process to extricate people from any accident, any aviation accident, because you have to unwrap the aircraft from around the victim. And in an incident like that, where it's a flat landing, a hard landing, and you do have that transmission that translates down into the cabin, that passenger space intrusion, you're instantly thinking airbags, cribbing, shoring, and all those extrication type tools. But it's going to be a very slow and deliberate and painful process.
You good on that slide?
Yep.
I just don't want to walk over you. Okay. So what if the engine is still running? In most of our GA or general aviation aircraft, switches, levers, handles they're made in red, so they're easily identifiable in emergency situations. So to secure our piston aircrafts, this is mostly what you would see, so our smaller aircraft, there is an acronym the firefighter must believe, TFFMB. Throttles are going to come out. So if you look at the panel of an aircraft, you're going to see switches. There's either just a black and red one. There may be a blue one in there. No big deal on that. The throttle is the black one because it's not always used for emergencies. So we would be able to pull that out to start suffocating that engine. Hey, we don't need as much fuel. Fuel mixture is in red. We're going to go ahead and pull out that fuel mixture. Fuel selector, which is usually, it could be in between the seats or off to the left side of the aircraft, to the left side of the leg. We're going to go ahead and turn that to off. The way that we turn it to off isn't just moving that handle. There's usually a small silver toggle that would allow inadvertent shutoff in flight. So you'll push that little toggle down and fully turn it to the off position. Magnetos looks like keys in a car. You're just going to go ahead and turn that left, turn it off, throw the keys out. And of course, the battery master, we're going to go ahead and shut down. Okay, so right here as well. We're going to go ahead and shut that down. That hopefully powers down the electrical system. But remember, you still have a live battery somewhere in that system. And anything you touch, make a note of it. Because when we do our accident investigation, did you pull the throttle forward or back? Did you touch this red lever? Did the aircraft crash? In what form? Did it crash prepared to crash land, or did something happen that caused it to crash? When I teach my students how to prepare for an emergency landing, we go through this exact checklist in flight, a little bit different, but they sweep their hand from left to right, shutting down the different systems, or voicing they will shut it down, and unlatching that door. So all ways that we secure the engine to hopefully eliminate any kind of charge from fuel or from the electrical system. So just keep that in mind, snap a picture of it. And there's a little bit different process for rotorcraft, so I'm going to let our expert take it away.
All right. So for helicopters, that left picture is talking about the fuel panel. So basically, if you see anything that says fuel on it, turn it to the off position. In the efforts to facilitate the investigation, try to take that mental snapshot of what was on versus off. You know, when you're moving a switch, it should be a deliberate movement. I know it's chaotic. You're shutting the engines down for a reason. That's going to be loud, and there's going to be a lot of chaos going on. So that's that time where you have to take a step back once again and think clearly and observe what it is that you're doing. And that other picture is a Bell 412. We have T-handles. There's two types of T-handles. One's a sweeping T-handle, which means as you pull the T-handle, it actually picks up a lever, a fuel lever, and shuts it off. But it also activates the firefighting system. That one in that picture there, that's a pull T-handle, where it just, when you pull it, it activates the firefighting system, or excuse me, it arms the firefighting system, but it also starts that starvation process for that engine. It cuts the fuel. And then down below is the single engine training type aircraft piston. It's going to have that mixture mag switch. So you're actually going to use that thumb and fingers motion to depress the button in the center and then pull it to start that starvation process. In turbine helicopters, you're going to look for engine shutoff points. This example is off of a Firehawk or a Black Hawk helicopter. The arrows are pointing to the two balls that are at the end of a handle. That's the fuel selector. And if you look just forward of those are that sweeping T-handle that I talked about. So if you pull that T-handle, it's going to arm that firefighting system, but it's also going to shut your fuel off. So yes, we've started the starvation process by cutting the fuel, but there's still 9 miles of fuel line for those engines to run through before they shut down. So it's not an instantaneous process. So now we're starting to look for throttles. And the thing about the throttles is, in aviation, there's always a barrier to shutting down an engine. So you can go from fly or full open to idle, but there's always a barrier, because typically in training, we use, to simulate engine failures, we'll go from that fly to idle to simulate that engine failure. And we don't want to have those inadvertent shutdowns in flight. So take a second. If it's too easy, you're missing something. Whether it's a twist grip or a lever or a power control lever, like is in this video here, grab, twist, crush, pull, do whatever you have to do to look at it mechanically and realize that there is a barrier to shutting this thing down. So I had to pull it down out of the detent to sweep it back. And then if you notice that thumb engagement released it from the idle stop block to go to the off position. So when the point I'm trying to make is that any aircraft you get in, look at it, depress it, push a button, see if there's anything else that could be that barrier. Because I don't want that. So you just went from fly, where that thing's at full speed, burning fuel. Now you take it to idle, you've prolonged that starvation process, because it's going to sit there at idle running even longer. Next slide. So here's some other examples from other aircraft. That top left, there's that center button you have to push to be able to pull that lever out. The next one is a thumb release. So you go from that right, as you rotate it, you're gonna have to release and move that mechanism out of the way to be able to rotate it over. and then your throttle quadrants there. One thing to consider with aircraft with throttle quadrants is they could have a thrust reverser. So going through that detent, you could actually, you want to watch for that position where it says off and leave it in that position. Don't move it anywhere else. Other aircraft also have auto relight. So the aircraft thinks that the engine failed, and so those igniters are still going to be trying to relight the engine. And so that's why it's imperative to turn off or de-energize the aircraft electrically.
Yeah, usually, and things like the Airbus. So when you go and you do get it down to idle and then you pull it back in the detent, it actually lifts up and over. So it makes a really big extension. So that's just not normal as well. So something to consider in the bigger aircraft is as you put it into a beta or a reverse mode, it just feels a little bit different. And you'll also see the prompt at the bottom where it's no longer in the off position. It's in reverse or reverse idle.
Yeah.
All right. So what are the indicators that the power is on or off in an aircraft? Well, the aircraft lighting is on. That's your dead giveaway. If you see lights, something is feeding those lights. If you hear fuel or hydraulic pump sounds, something is feeding those pumps. Any kind of gyro or instrumentation that is still working, avionics fan sounds, anything that's powered up, and if landing gear lights are up or down, they're showing color, we know that there's something being fed to that system. The rocker switches that we see, they could be two separate switches, but usually they're kind of married together in one, and you can kind of isolate each switch. One is the alternator and the other is a battery. Just get rid of them both. Just go ahead and click both of them, and hopefully that'll disconnect it. But remember, we still have a live battery somewhere in the aircraft. It's just not feeding through that bus, wherever the bus is clicking it off through. Oops. So document whatever you touch. In this case here, we did a crash of an aircraft that went through a hangar. Thankfully, the gentleman survived, but he just plowed it through a hangar. And the firefighters came in and they were pulling him out and they pulled all these switches up and down. And he goes, the firefighter said, "Oh, I touched a bunch of switches." Okay, which ones? Did you have to? So if possible, do not disturb anything unless you have to. In a case like this, there really was no need to shut off anything because the engine was actually across the tarmac. It was somewhere else. So the pilots, we were able to take them out. Why were we touching switches? And I just think that he saw lights, and that's okay. I like that, but know what you touched. And in this case, if you look down here to the bottom left, you'll see those double red rocker switches. If he saw lights and he was concerned, all he needed to do was hit that switch and it would disconnect it. And the battery in this case is, it was actually kind of laying out on the ramp anyway. So just document what you touch. That will help with the preservation of evidence. If you don't know where the battery lives in the aircraft, there's some easy ways to find out. There are indicators normally right below the battery. There is some form of a switch where the ground power unit might be able to be plugged in. In GA, it looks like an outlet cover, and you also may have tiny little vents underneath. So if the battery acid leaks and it gets into that pan, it won't stay there and corrode inside the aircraft. It'll actually drip down onto the ramp. So just all protective ways, redundant measures to protect it. But those are all ways to identify where the battery might be located in the aircraft. And then how do we disconnect it? Well, in some cases, we may not have to, but in others, like this jet, we'll just be able to find the battery, pull that silver T handle, and it pops right out. Pretty easy. Just disengages the system, and then the battery sits alone. You don't have to take it out, but if you're concerned about it catching on fire or becoming a hazard, it can be removed that way. But again, document. Did you disconnect the battery? Did you pull it out of the aircraft? Because we want to know, hey, where's that battery? Is that what caused the crash? And post-crash fires, if properly managed with quick acting response, people can be saved. The top picture over to the left was an incredible story. This happened about 2.5 years ago, I think, 2 years ago maybe, and it was in Florida when this jet, this Challenger, lost both engines. There was a kind of a system problem, but both engines, they attempted to land on the highway. They did a fabulous job, but as they landed, they ended up striking that concrete wall. And what you don't know about those walls is they stack almost like panels on top of each other. So when the nose went into it, unfortunately, the pilots got injured from that slamming down. So they were fatals. But in the back of that aircraft, the flight attendant that was back there, the woman that was working, knew from her training that she could get people out through the cargo door. So she was able to then get those passengers out, not one of the normal egress doors because that was fully involved, she was able to get them basically through cargo and out to safety, and they were all survivors. So a very cool story that she didn't have to learn that because of her position. She wasn't a true flight attendant. She was like a cabin attendant, but on her own, she took that training and learned more about her aircraft that she would be servicing and was able to save lives. So such an incredible story of survival there. Airplane doors are going to vary from model to model. So how do we get people out? It can be as simple as a latch. It can be as simple as a push button where the door slides up. In the cases down here, this lever does have to be pulled fully from 45 to about 90 degrees to release it. We also see baggage compartments. I always encourage my pilots not to lock their doors, including their baggage doors, when they go for flight. Do not lock it, because if it is locked, you have just lost an egress point if you crash and you're entrapped in your aircraft. So all baggage doors should be unlocked. In this case, you push on it and this little handle pops out. You turn it in the direction of the arrow up and the door comes open. Canopies slide back, and these doors, you pretty much just pull it out 90 degrees. So always to open that door with small latches.
Yep. So helicopter doors are very similar. They're designed to be, most airframes are designed to have the doors open up against the slipstream. So if your door does come ajar in flight, it's always an emotional event when it happens, especially at night, but it's not a catastrophic incident. So typically we'll just come to a hover and close the door and resecure it. So that's the idea behind them being in line with the slipstream. Some doors open like car doors, like that picture on the right, and then in the back, the cabin doors typically slide open. So one thing to note with the cabin doors in the back, if you rotate the handle and pull on it, it doesn't open. Some of them are held by spring pressure with hooks. So if you rotate the handle, push forward on the door, those hooks will release, and then you can open the door. So don't just think that the door is jammed without attempting to push it forward against those springs and then slide the door open.
So I have a question for all of our pilots. Is it an emergency if your door pops open in flight? Put it yes or no in the chat. Is it an emergency? Thank you. Thank
Resounding no. I like it.
I love it. We have amazing pilots that are going to join session after session because they are going to be here. However, last year alone, we lost 7 people over 4 accidents with doors that had popped open and them not knowing what to do and spinning their aircraft into the ground. So it is a big, big deal. One of the questions that popped up was, yes, it's a big deal if it's a pressurized aircraft. Well, yes, that could be a problem of pressurized. But for our smaller aircraft, when they take off, if any of these doors, helicopter, fixed wing, twin engine, it pops open, oh, well, I've flown a Stearman that has been open, right? Open canopy. It's okay. We're not going to get sucked out. It makes a lot of noise. But if any of you on here are flight instructors, the next time you take your students up, open the door. Just pop it open and teach them so they don't have the startle effect if it ever happens in real life. Oh, well, a door popped open, but I'm going to be alive to talk about it. Right?
It does get your heart rate up, that's for sure.
It does.
Okay. So helicopters are kind of like the Swiss Army knife of aviation. There's a myriad of configurations, from sling loads to hoist configurations, or anything. We can spend an hour talking about it, but this aircraft right here, they're set up for a hoist operation. That crew member that's out on the skid, he's secured in by web gear, and he's got a harness on, and the harness is secured by a pigtail that goes into an anchor point in the aircraft. So you can imagine if that aircraft was involved in an accident right now, that the gentleman on the skid is going to be slung around. He's going to have all kinds of insane injuries. It's okay to cut the webbing. It's okay to cut through their harness after the accident. Do what you need to do to expose the body and treat the injuries. The seatbelt cutters that a lot of people carry, those are cool, but just be aware that this is heavy duty web gear that they're wearing and they're secured with. And when you go to pull on it, and some of you may have used those seatbelt cutters in car accidents, but they tend to bunch the webbing up, and you have to kind of hold the webbing flat as you're cutting through it. So it's never an easy feat to cut through this material. Just imagine the accident sequence that individual would be involved in and the types of injuries that they would have. Not to mention in a small aircraft like this A-Star that they're in, that person being secured back there in the cabin can come forward and impact the pilot as well. So they basically become a tethered projectile inside that cabin. Yeah.
Next. Sorry.
Yep. Next one. All right, so rescue techniques with helicopters. Make note of how the aircraft is lying. Is it a stable accident or is it unstable? And how are we going to approach this thing? Are we going to go, from the downhill to uphill, or, just taking a look at it in terms of stability, like we mentioned with that accident in Utah in the snow and ice. I might want to approach it from uphill down to it because I don't want that thing rolling on top of my responders. The pilots, and especially, for example, this Black Hawk here, the cockpit seats are designed to stroke down into the floor. So if they have a vertical impact, that part of the crash attenuation system of that aircraft is for that seat to stroke. So your legs go from that normal 90-degree seated position to where their feet may be at eye level, or their knees will be at the chest height. So they'll actually, their rear end will be down inside that well, the seat well, as we call it. If the dashes come in and you can't get the door open, one thing to also consider is up top, we have what's called a greenhouse. It's plexiglass. It's the softest plexiglass probably on the entire aircraft. And those are usually really brittle from being out in the sun. So you can actually kick them in. So that's one pretty easy way to extricate a pilot out, is through that greenhouse if the aircraft's laying on its side. The windshields on not majority, but on numerous aircraft are laminated Lexan and glass. And so if you're using a carbide tip blade and you're trying to cut through the windshield, I've actually watched saw blades get smaller as people were cutting through that windshield. I mean, it's a very laborious task. It looks attractive in terms of extrication. Hey, let's just cut the windshield, remove the windshield, and get the pilots out. But it's a painful process because they are part of the structural integrity of the aircraft, and they're just designed to take a hit. There is the A post. You can cut the A post for entry. Door pins. If a door has external hinges, K12 quickie saw right to those hinges, zip, and then you can remove it, because if it's external hinges, it's attached to a jettison handle inside the aircraft, and that's what we use. We manipulate the handle and then we can kick the door out away from the aircraft to be able to get out. So external hinges are a great place to cut. Cutting seatbelts, and we talked about the transmission module coming down, driving down through with that passenger space intrusion. There's going to be a lot of cutting and lifting to unwrap the aircraft from around your victims.
All right, and that brings us to the pressurized aircraft. And pressurized aircraft are a little bit different because these aircraft are thicker in the skin walls, because we do go up into flight and we pressurize that tube that we're taking up there. So all of pressurized aircraft doors have pins or hooks that hold the door shut, as you can see in these pictures. They do have a door seal, and we do get alerts inside our flight deck if one of these door seals is leaking, because it won't actually pressurize correctly. So all part of our checklist, right? All things we check to make sure, and it'll give notifications should there be an issue. But if we need to land and the aircraft remains pressurized and you as responders need to assist us getting out, you must follow the directions on the door. If you just go cutting into this, it could explode all that pressure outward and you could be injured. So follow the directions. Here, you're going to go ahead and push the toggle button. You're going to hear a hissing sound. It releases the pressure after a few seconds. And now you're going to be able to push open that silver handle, move it upward to the open position, and the door will fall down. Be cautious with these doors. They are held by small cables, so you can see in this picture. And if one of these cables have been damaged or they ruptured, sometimes these doors can get extremely heavy with the stairs on them. They might come down at you, and I never want you to get hurt. So always sidestep it when you're opening the door to allow it not to hurt you. If we need to cut for some reason, we're pulling and pulling on that handle, it won't let us out, we've pushed the button, we now can cut through this with your tools, your saws. But make sure you put at least a 3 to 4 inch berth around the frame of the door. Remember, we need to cut away the entire pin system. We don't want to cut through the pins. We need to remove the entire pin system. So make sure that you go outside the door and cut for that to be released. And when you open it, remember it's going to be very, very heavy. It could be upwards of a couple 100 pounds in our Gulfstreams and our Challenger products. So be cautious when you do cut it. Allow it space for it to fall to the ground and release folks out that way. Most of our larger aircraft, though, do have smaller egress doors in the form of windows, and that may be an easier way to egress folks out. But key takeaways, push the red button to be able to release the internal pressure, cut around the pins as needed. Now, getting victims out can be a challenge. It doesn't matter how big or how small the flight deck is because each one has their own complications. In our larger aircraft, our Airbus and our Boeing, we have seats that they move like your car seat electronically, and they're very slow. So if we have a large pilot sitting in there that has collapsed over the flight instruments, we are going to have to take a little bit of time to have the mechanical seat move its way down, right? But it's really tricky because now there's other complications such as the throttle quadrant. So we have our thrust levers here, all of our different FMS systems, our emergency systems. So you're going to have to drag them over that. And as that flight deck gets smaller, like King Airs or Citations or Learjets, they're very, very tight. So getting you in with all of your gear to egress these people may be complicated. And small aircraft are a challenge, even if the doors are, if they're jammed in any way. But think about smaller home-built aircraft with canopies. We just need to start thinking, how am I going to get in here? How much weight can I move? And what am I going to bump on the way out? I don't want to trigger any systems that could be live, such as ballistic systems, airbags, stuff like that. Extrication may not be easy. The top picture is us using for the car, right? We use our little spike, the glass breaks, we get people out. That doesn't work in airplanes. You can see the picture to the right, how that plexon appears. It shatters in big panels. At the bottom, that is a bird strike. So that's a good indicator right there that a bird went through that windshield at a higher velocity. You can see the blood smeared in the back and on the door. And this aircraft with a pilot sitting there probably took some impact. So really a traumatic flight to be able to get that out of the sky. As Dan said, you can't just cut through some of this glass. It'll eat your blades apart. So consider how else can we get somebody out? Doors or cutting through the metal is a lot better than this. In fact, when we did one of our phase 2 in California, we got some fuselages and one of your firefighters was able to secure a Southwest fuselage. And he had people trying to cut through this, remember, the Lexon, and they couldn't get through it. So they were just using their saw. But as soon as we moved in between the frame of the aircraft and that aluminum and steel, we cut right through it. So
yep, yeah, that was a good one.
It was. I thought that was one of the most remarkable stations he set up because it just proved a point when people always say, oh, I don't believe that, I could get through it. And they were, of course, bumping off of it. So really great evidence when we get to see it. In our pressurized aircraft, you'll see there are multiple layers of paint. So we have our inner paint, our middle paint, our outer. Sometimes there's gas, there can be argon in there. So this is, it's pressurized for a reason. So this glass doesn't shatter once we get to altitude. It has its system built in place so it can expand as needed once we get up into the sky. So just different layers when you consider it. Even in our smaller aircraft, some folks will say, just kick out the windscreen. I could kick through that. You're going to kick through that with broken ankles, a shattered tibia, and a broken wrist? Probably not. So unlatch that door, try to do all you can, but it is extremely hard to kick out these because they're made. They're made for that. And look for clues. Again, perishable evidence. In this case, chances are it was a bird strike because we see the feathers on this outside air temperature probe shattered the window. We do have some of the what do we call it? Snarge? Is that what it's called? I always mess it up. It's snarge, right?
Yeah.
Yes, we call it snarge, and you collect it, and you actually send it to Dr. Dove, who goes in, she's in Washington, D.C. in the Smithsonian, and she will tell you exactly what kind of bird and what age it was. It's amazing. So snarge. I always somehow say another word, but very helpful. And you can see the blood splatter inside there. But also hail. If this aircraft made it down safely and hail broke the windshield, and you see these large balls of wet snow inside the flight deck, document that because by the time we get there, it's going to melt. Take pictures for us. And seatbelts, we are supposed to be wearing seatbelts as pilots. I can't say that all pilots follow this rule, but they should. So seatbelts can come in 2 parts, so just around the waist. There can be 3-part harnesses, kind of like your car seat. a 4-point, which goes around your hips and over your shoulders, and of course a 5-point, which is hips, shoulders, and your crotch strap. Easiest way to get people out of here, in the top left picture, pull 90 degrees on that belt strap, kind of like your airline seat, it should release. Some, you just simply push a button, everything pops out. In the bottom two, one, you lift that silver latch right here, and this hook will release everything. And in the case of most of our aircraft, our jet aircraft, we kind of have the turntable. So you just turn the turntable and you turn it, you push a button and turn it. The top ones will pop out, but a full turn will drop off 4 of the sides, leaving one connected, and you can egress the person out quickly. The new ones that we are seeing that are approved through the DOT with the FAA is the CARES system. And this system is built for children to put over an existing seat on an airline. So it is a kind of a 4-point harness. So it clicks just like a car seat up above their chest and around their hips to keep them in the seat, give them a little extra protection than just a 3-year-old sitting in that seat by themselves. So great device that as a mom, I really stand behind this product and love that it is there. One thing to consider in these seatbelts is that if you are a pilot, brief your passengers how to operate the seatbelt. While it is normal for you, some seatbelts require you to move it to a full 90-degree position for it to release. And there was a King Air that had crashed, and they found that the occupants that perished had all their fingernails ripped apart because they were clawing at the seatbelt trying to get it off, and they burned alive. They couldn't figure out to pull it a full 90 degrees because nobody briefed them. It is a very important part of all of your safety briefings. So if you again see that evidence, you see a body, they've burned in the crash, and we see that their fingernails have chiseled down, document that and get it to the FAA or the NTSB. And now we have airbags, which is really cool, that's built in. So airbags, if you get into the bulkhead row on airliners, you're going to see a really bulky pad over your seatbelt. Cirruses have them installed, like the photo on the bottom right. They look like kind of bulky bags over there, but upon impact, they do trigger and these balloons kind of pop up. So I'll see if I can get this video working for you to have just a quick peek what they look like. So just a little bit of protection, different ones that are around that fill up around you, and all of the test sled that showed the impact. This is the airbag system. There is a deceleration switch underneath the seat, which will trigger it, and the airbag system is its own unique charge. They can have helium or nitrogen in there, and disconnecting the aircraft battery will not disable this system. It is self-contained. So in these pictures, you'll see how violent it can come out. Great for our pilots, great for our passengers, but you'll see how the airbag protected our gentleman on the right, but not on the left. So all just a great example, and this comes from our CAMI test center over in Oak City. So here's what our system looks like. If the system was activated, if we were to cut through it by accident, the blast can last approximately 5 to 10 milliseconds. The pressure could be released between 6,200 and 7,400 PSI. That's enough to lacerate your skin. So be careful about this. And here is what you can use. If you scan this QR code, this will give you the first responder info. There are links to it, but also you want to contact, it used to be online, and I'm so sorry it's not online anymore. You have to contact customer service at amsafe.com and ask for the first responder reference guide. So if you are able to do that, take a picture of this, contact them and ask them for it. I don't know why they pulled it off online, but I believe it still lives at this QR link. And we'll learn about this when we talk about ballistic rockets too. For some reason, their support lines have all dropped, but have this available ahead of time. And all that information lives in that reference guide. I do believe I have it downloaded on my computer. So if I can find it, I will also attach it to the email going out with your completion certificate. But I can't guarantee it. I just have to make sure I didn't put it on a live drive. Oh, nope, this is yours, Dan. Sorry, go. Whew. Your slide.
Yep. Some aircraft have high pressure bottles, oxygen tanks. So your medical aircraft will sometimes carry those jump bags, like you see in the picture there, the red one, that'll have pressurized O2 cylinders in them. But we also have installed systems. So you have medical aircraft with oxygen generators or oxygen cylinders. And then the aircraft also have onboard nitrogen systems. nitrogen tanks, landing gear struts are pressurized. Your propeller hubs are also pressurized with nitrogen. And then we can't forget about the tires either. Next slide. Your oxygen bottles, extra credit points for anybody that can tell me what that red box is in the tail of the aircraft.
Go ahead, toss it in chat. ELT? They're good.
There you go. Yep. So yeah, that's the ELT. One thing to note when you're handling O2 cylinders, you're not allowed to smile like that gentleman in the picture down on the bottom right. But in all seriousness, though, some aircraft do have installed O2 systems for a pressurized aircraft or people that are conducting high altitude operations, or your medical aircraft will have those installed. It's that green tank in the back, or excuse me, cylinder in the back, and you see the regulator attachment there. It does O2 not inherently flammable, but it does support combustion, so you can see the problem with that. And they do become projectiles. So if you see an O2 cylinder sitting up on end, people are removing stuff out of the aircraft, and one's sitting up on end, just go ahead and lay it down so it's flat on the ground, so it doesn't fall and knock that stem off, and it turns into a projectile on your scene.
Definitely. And this is something that we went searching for a lot of these bottles during the Philadelphia crash with the Learjet that went down. A lot of people, of course, our online warriors all said, oh my goodness, the bottles exploded. And that is not the truth. They actually stayed intact. But we were able to find all the bottles and then have them tested with the bomb squad just to make sure that there were no cracks and leaks. And they all tested fine because it was a medical carriage aircraft of there. So we did find them. If you see them on the ground, a lot of them were damaged. I didn't touch them because I didn't want to complicate if they were damaged. So we did have the FBI take them out of our way, and they put them in a safe area and drained them, just so we know.
Oh.
Next, please.
Okay, so brake lines. So brake accumulators. It's basically stored pressure so that you have effective brake response. They are filled with brake fluid that's corrosive. Those cylinders are combustible. And they're under pressure. So those cylinders get pressurized. I don't remember the numbers on various aircraft, but that is a pressure cylinder in that picture there. And we can go to the next one. So another one is the fire suppression system. So aircraft equipped with firefighting systems, it's a halon bottle. It's got a few pounds of halon in there, but those pressure cylinders are pressurized up to almost 500 psi. So they use an explosive squib, which is just a little tiny 22 rimfire round, or cartridge without the round. And when you select your whichever engine or using a directional control valve on where you want that agent dispensed, and then you fire that actual bottle, the squib will go off and then discharge the agent using that pressure through those lines and then into whatever cavity you selected. So it does have an explosive squib. It creates a dense cloud, and that cloud, they use halon because halon is such a fine particulate that it basically just goes into every possible orifice and nook and cranny to smother the fire.
Very helpful. And we'll take a visit to this later on when you do your last case study, won't we?
Yes, we will.
Yes. Which is perfect timing for our break. We went over by 2 minutes, so I'm going to let you guys come back at 2 minutes after the hour. So go ahead and take your break, and I will, again, pop through some of the questions and see what I could answer while you guys go offline and take breaks. Yes, Colleen posted the AmSafe info, so thank you so much for that. I'm glad that you found that. That goes missing sometimes. There's a lot of comments. Liquid O2 for sure. Some people carry that. It can be in tires. Thank you for your comment, George. We try. We've done this a lot. We love it. And what's even more fun is when we start doing the phase 2. So we haven't gotten there yet, but phase 2 is the in-person, and we have learned so much. Actually, Zach and Pat Ryan that are on as our presenters, we just did one a couple months ago. I think it was June, maybe. We went out and did a whole event out there for theirs, and it was fantastic. So we're looking forward to doing more of that. And welcome back, Kristen. I'm glad that you get more information each time. We try to spice the slides up each time. And Brennan, I know, you know what, I thought about adding blimps and dirigibles, but I did the research. Currently, there are only 7 qualified pilots that fly blimps in the entire country. I thought that was very interesting. And actively, I think there's only 14 blimps. So while I want to do it, I have to be very attentive to time. We have a lot to cram into 4. So if you are willing to teach a module on blimps, I will gladly set you up to do that. So reach out to me if you know a lot about blimps or dirigibles, and we will do an amazing presentation with you. Will we repeat this session? Yeah, I think the next time Dan and I could possibly get this done will be like April, May timeframe. So keep your eyes open on that spans, FAAsafety.gov. Share the link. I will always take emails and put them on a mailing list. So if you have a department that might be interested in taking this, send me their information. I put them in a master roster and I send it out once we get to that point. Do you know at what airport phase 2 will be? I know for sure now I will be able to get it done in the New England area because now I've transferred from DC up to Boston. So we're going to try to run at least 2 up here in Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and or Connecticut. So that'll be very, very cool on the East Coast. I would like to get another one out in California. It's just with our continuing resolution with the government, I'm not quite sure what money we are going to have to get me out there to assist and do that, but I definitely can help folks set up their own. A little tricky, but with a lot of hard work, you'll get it done. Daniel, if you would like to be a presenter at some time, go ahead and send me, obviously your resume, your credentials. We are looking, Dan and I, like I said, we're looking to do a phase 3. It's going to be very detailed and advanced, a little bit more than what we're offering now, but there's a high demand for it. So I think it's time we do a phase 3. So if you would like, let's see what your credentials are and see what you can offer. Registration information, yes, but it will be another blast. So we'll put it out on FAAsafety.gov. Everybody who is on here will receive an FAAsafety.gov credit with your wings credit. So as long as you sign up for notifications from the Boston area, you will see if we are running an event. Oscar Rosalski, I would love to answer that question. It would be awesome to hear your perspective on picking an emergency landing site in different reasons and seasons. I would love to talk to you about that offline. I have so much feedback on that. And in fact, I was just interviewed for AOPA. So you'll see some videos coming out from the AOPA Flight Safety Institute speaking about that. So I gave some good insight to those 2 gentlemen. Phase 2 is free. Anything offered from the government is free. So any phase 2 that is in your area, you should never have to pay for unless they offer lunch. And that is not sponsored by the government. It is simply a catering company. I would love to come to Florida. If it's Key West, I'm there. Pat Ryan, go ahead.
Yes, if I can elaborate a little bit on the cost for phase 2.
Yes.
Since we just did that in June. Usually phase 2 is comprised of volunteer pilots who come out and volunteer their time in their aircraft. It's usually kind of catch can. I think we had like about 13 aircraft at the one we did in June, to include 2 helicopters, light sport, twins, jets. Even we were very lucky to be able to hold it at the Michigan Museum of Flight, which they had DC-3 and some other aircraft that people were able to look at and have a good time with. Lunch was sponsored by a local individual who basically got pizza for everybody and also beverages. So it worked out really well. So you kind of have to find a sponsor and go from there. Now, I know a lot of fire departments have if you will, support agencies, friends of the fire department, and they have basically funds that they use to supply meals for various functions that they do. So you can get really creative. And so thanks for that, Melanie. And if anybody has any questions, I'll put my email in the chat. And with regards to doing in Michigan, in the Detroit area, we'll have to coordinate that for obviously the better weather. Thanks, Melanie.
All right, and ta-da, Antonio, I know you are itching at the bit here to go to the commercial in-flight medical response, but I promise we are getting there. It's all linked in, and I got this all down to a science, so I promise I'm not going to forget about you. But we'll leave it up in chat. So moving on, we are joining you here. We're talking about ballistic parachutes. We've bumped in and out of this a lot of times during this presentation. Many of you probably are already aware that these exist, but if you do not, aircraft, several of them, are now integrated with an kind of a built-in parachute system. And how this system deploys is with a built-in rocket system. And there are more than 50,000 of these ballistic parachutes in service today. The parachute recovery system ignition is manually activated by the pilot. Overhead, there's a T handle, or in between the legs, right by the in between the seats. We can go ahead and deploy it. Once we pull that, basically it's like a wire. Once you pull it and you move it a quarter of an inch, it triggers the system. An ignition system will actually blow a rocket out the back that will take the chute with it. The chute then opens up, similar to if you're looking at your old Apollo rockets and how they would get those pods back down to the water. A 55-foot canopy comes out about half a second later, and there's these Kevlar bridles that are integrated into the aircraft. The rocket that is ignited accelerates to over 100 miles an hour in 1/10 of a second, and it gives over 225 pounds of thrust with a 1.2-second burn. And we'll see this in a video shortly. It yanks out a large parachute and it burns that solid propellant. The ignition is black powder magnesium mix, and this doesn't care if it is on the ground or in the sky. So remember that as we are positioning our fire trucks around a downed aircraft, consider that all of them have, basically all of them have a rocket system until we determine that they don't. Here are some things you look for to see if the presence of a BRS system is there. Is there an activation handle? Is there housing or cable? Do you see it tangled in the wreckage? Is there a rocket engine or a launch tube? And is there logo identification? I would love to tell you that all rockets are labeled clearly on the outside of the aircraft, but sadly I have learned that even people that put them in aftermarket, they are not putting the proper placards on the outside of the aircraft. So don't always count on seeing the logo of BRS or inbuilt rocket system. Now, when we are at that accident scene for safety, note that the rocket motor is mostly hidden by an aluminum beam and the igniter is visible. You'll see it looks like kind of a press primer. And then we have the T handle that'll be inside. If you see a safety pin inside of it, the system is stable to the point where if we don't touch anything, it should not deploy. But if the aircraft had trauma, it ended up in terrain, we don't know how far that cable got torn inside of its housing. So be cautious all the time that even if it seems like it's pinned shut, it might be live and active. Here is where the handle would be inside the flight deck. Here is the length of cable that runs through housing to the back. The amount of pull required is 1/4 to 1/2 of an inch. That's nothing. Just a little tug and it can activate the whole system. So if you take your saw and you slice through the top of this trying to egress a person, the top of an aircraft, and you cut through this cable, there is a chance that you might activate the system because you pull inside the housing that wire and you trip the system and the rocket shoots out. No problem if you're in a giant field and there's no one standing behind you, but in the event that there is, they're going to go for a ride. So this gentleman is building an airplane and he decided to test and film what his system looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and play it and we'll take a peek at what it looks like. So that's it being activated, pulling out the giant bridle with the parachute attached. That gets it away from the aircraft and the propeller, so it allows it to fill up with air. And we'll see how much pressure it takes when it blows through the top. So if you or bystanders or your truck is there, and he's just kind of walking through the steps of what is getting sent out of his aircraft with the system. There's the Kevlar cables. He's happy as skeleton still on board. I like Scrappy. I think he's cool. But it shows us how much pressure comes out the back of that aircraft. So here is your cheat sheet. Has the parachute deployed? Okay, do you see a parachute laying in the wreckage? If yes, it's still not over, because if it catches with air, it will continue to drag this aircraft with occupants over you, the victims, perhaps your vehicle. So secure or sever the bridles. Drive your fire truck over it, cut the bridles, get rid of the parachute, because it's only going to add to contaminating the scene. Once that is done, there is no longer a hazard to the rescuer and you are safe to extricate the patient. However, if the parachute is not deployed, we're going to then go through the rest. Consider that it is armed and capable of being accidentally activated. Remember, that thrust is waiting for you. So how do we stabilize it? If the aircraft is relatively intact, we can insert a 3/16 inch pin or rod in the handle holder, and then you can sever the activation housing by using a Felco cutter. It's the C16 5/8 inch cable cutter. So if you don't have this in your budget already, it's a good tool to have. Cable cutters that do not have that equal pressure that cuts at 360 degrees is not recommended, because if it side cuts it and it pulls it like kind of on an angle, it'll rip through the housing and it'll tug that system and activate it. A lot of times in the wreckage when we see it, we do call in the FBI. They have their bomb squad and they will come take this. And it's really minor when they go and activate the system. So we think that once they deploy it, it's going to be that huge rocket that we saw. But the way that they're able to cut it and isolate it is they simply just sizzle it down. It's almost like a trick candle. So it's good, but we do need their assistance. So here's a picture of an impact with terrain. The aircraft is totaled, but look, we have the parachute still intact in its casing, and we see the rocket sitting with all the housings and cables. This system is still live in the wreckage. So don't go traveling through the wreckage and tripping over those wires, because you can arm it and hit your buddy behind you. Not something we want at all. Most Cirruses are equipped, so that was the smaller Cirrus that comes out the back, but don't be surprised now the Vision Jet, which is the Cirrus Jet, does have an 89-foot parachute. It's a lot bigger. It deploys out the nose, and those bridles are still wrapped around the fuselage. This aircraft landed, it was, I believe it was South America, so we can see that it's still at a gear collapse. It's not on fire. People got out safe, but is the system still alive? And the answer is yes, it can come out the nose. It also can be installed in other systems. The Cessna 182 has it, looks a little bit different. The handle is down here between the legs of the pilots, and it comes out the back in a nice canister. It also is in gliders. So in this case, this glider entered the house. The salvage crew went up there. The firefighters had secured the scene, and nobody noticed this tiny little triangle on the top that there was a live BRS. So when Chris, our salvage expert, went up there and he was trying to get it out, he goes, whoa, 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 this has a live system. So he was able to extract that. Again, he's not just Joe Smith's towing company. He's trained and knowledgeable about this. And he was able to extract it and then hoist the wreckage down out of this woman's house. And they live in drones and ultralights and. These parachutes are everywhere. So even if you see a downed drone, be careful, because that little rocket system could still deploy. In skydiving, we mentioned it a little bit, there's an AAD, but it will not hurt you. It's just that if you do cut through it, it may have a small flashbang. All it is kind of like a small bullet to trip and cut away the main chute and send away the backup chute. So before you go any further, I will say that this link probably doesn't work. I am very angry with Cirrus for this. They used to have a 24-hour hotline. It doesn't work anymore. They have phone numbers that lead you to voicemails. I have not been able to get through. So back where I used to work here, AVP 110 or the Rock Walk, call us. Call. It's a 202-267-3333, and you will be able to get a hold of one of the investigators who will walk you through how to disable the BRS system. If you don't know how to do it, take some training, download the paperwork that we do have on the FAA's website, and I will try to include that also with the links in the paperwork once I send you out your certificates. But shame on BRS for not having the 24-hour line anymore. So pop quiz, here you go. What hazards are you thinking about in this picture? Toss it in the chat. The road, the fuel, We kind of just talked about something.
Brush fire, drainage, hazmat.
And the BRS system. There is a
Hazard
police
guard.
car positioned right behind that aircraft. So in the event that there's still a live rocket, that sheriff's going to be going for quite the ride. So just consider that as, hey, I'm not going to position my car directly behind the aircraft. I'm not going to put my fire truck back there. I'm not going to stand back there until I know the system is secure, because this aircraft easily could have had that in there. And keep, again, bystanders out of the way. To you.
All right. So some other unique things about dealing with aircraft. You see in the nose of that giant airplane that they do have radar in them. Actually, several aircraft, not just the large body aircraft. Tip tanks. Those are for extended fuel ranges. So if you see that bulge at the end of the wing, I'm not trying to challenge any of the pilot's intelligence in the room, but so they could have extended range fuel tanks. And then hot nacelles on the leading edge of those engine nacelles. Those things do heat up for anti-ice properties. Yeah. And continuing on. So this is where we get into that carbon fiber discussion. I mentioned it with the helicopter rotor blades on some helicopters. In carbon stable in its manufactured state, it is stabilized. But when carbon breaks apart and when it's burned and it atomizes or on impact and it turns into those fine particulates, you're looking at 1,000 microns, which is the thickness of a dime, all the way down to those to where they're barely even visible. So it goes from table salt all the way through human hair, and then you can barely see it. So think about those dust particles being inhaled, the inhalation of it, or the absorption into your skin. They are sharp. They're razor-like material, so it will get a purchase point and enter into your body. So part of the containment of these materials is the use of floor wax in a Hudson sprayer. It works really well for those. If you notice that carbon fiber footprint that's there, floor wax is a great thing, and that's contained in the order 8020.11D. That's not the 12C, Melanie.
This one here.
Yeah.
As far as D.
Yeah.
That's the latest one. Sorry.
Got it. Okay. So yeah, so floor wax is a great tool to keep in your arsenal, especially if you have airports in your district. It could be used to minimize that exposure. It kind of helps glue the stuff down and keep it where it's at.
Yeah, and it's something we don't really consider. Not a lot of fire departments have this or carry it, but we do actually have it in spritz bottles when we're working around the scene. So while we're doing this, we use the floor wax, just similar as you see Future, and spritz it all over, and it'll actually keep it down so when we're walking, it doesn't get airborne and cause us to bring it into our respirators, right? We just want to try to keep it as clean and as stable as possible.
Yeah.
And now for our medical folks that are in the room, we'll talk a little bit about this. I promise it doesn't really get gory, so don't get too scared, but injuries that are unique to aviation. One of the questions that keeps popping up is there a course, or are we going to talk about how do we do in-flight emergency medicine? I will tell you right off the bat that, in a different world, in the different Melanie world, I do teach two pilot kind of companies, so this was my past, how to do CPR. So if you're ever in an airliner and someone says, oh my goodness, they're down, and the flight attendants don't want to act and do CPR, and you want to raise your hand and say, I can assist, we do have to teach you how to do CPR with a straddle effect. Basically, you put your knee on each side of the patient's hips, and you're going to go ahead and perform CPR in a straddle mode because we have a very tight aisle to operate in. If the person is having any kind of other medical conditions, such as respiratory difficulties, anaphylactic shock, where they need medication, cardiac issues, there is an AED, a defibrillator on board, and there are controlled medications. While the flight attendants are not trained to use them, they can get med control. So anytime a medical issue happens on flight, the pilots go in contact with an air doctor, and the air doctor talks back as to, hey, this is going to be an emergency landing. We're going to go ahead and basically land at the closest airport, so a deviation. Next, what kind of medications are we going to give? And they'll give that call to the lead purser, the flight attendant, and he or she will be able to start running the call. but they also break out and say, is anybody here a physician, firefighter, EMT, nurse? And you might be called to service. You will follow their directives, but I've seen a lot of times the purser hands it over to the trained technician and says, do something about it. So you might be the one initiating CPR, an AED, and the med kit that they have secured up there does have a bunch of controlled drugs that can help with anaphylactic, with diabetic reactions. We also have Narcan we carry now. So unfortunately, we do see a lot of unresponsive folks from opioid overdoses, all things that can be used on there. Certifying can come in a couple different ways. It can be through CPR trained certified people, so you're learning that and modifying it, as well as EMSIs, so medical services instructors out there. If you would like me to connect you with people local in your area, I do have a plethora of people that have attended these classes and offered their help. So if you want, just email me and I'll get you in the right place for that. So I hope that answers all the questions about in-flight medical readiness. So the injuries that are unique to aviation, consider the impact that the victims sustained. How fast did they hit? What terrain did they go into? How well were they supported in their seat? Did they have a, excuse me, a 2-point seatbelt, a 5-point seatbelt? What impact did they have? Was there fire? Was there smoke? Think of the type of aircraft they were in. A helicopter injury is going to look a lot differently than a jet versus a tail dragger versus a seaplane. Sorry. Frog in the throat. Treat the life-threatening injuries first. What should you as a pilot be flying with? Always tourniquets, always trauma shears. You want to protect your own life if you crash. How do you set up your safety bag? What do you put in it? Life preserver, right? Any kind of medication, insulin that you may need. And what additional resources are you going to need for transport? If it's a deep wood penetration, a water rescue, a tree rescue, or hot, cold, and rural terrain, how will that impact the health of your victim? How hard is it going to be on that victim to transport them an extra 20 minutes by boat? What other kind of equipment should we bring in? And is a hoist rescue the best option? Dan does a lot of these, and if somebody falls on the trail in California, they clearly can't hike out. So what do?
Definitely a hoist rescue. Yeah.
You put them in their diaper sling, right? And up they go. So there's the diaper sling. You get them up there. And these are all things is it an option in your area? I know for sure in Connecticut, we don't have an option for hoist rescue. It is not an option. Nobody in our state can do that. So what is it an option or is it not? Know it ahead of time. Know how to contact those people and consider that certain injuries you will see that vary in pilots. So an impact force when injuries occur, a G force is something that we sustain, right? Gravity force, and 1G is 220 pounds of pressure. That's impact force. So when we look at these numbers of different injuries pilots can sustain, look at the levels of Gs our bodies can hang on to before they break. Anything like a nose fracture is 30 Gs. So we see nose fractures in 30 Gs. We see aorta intimal tears inside the aorta at 50 Gs. We can see a pelvic fracture, which is a fatal injury. Once we break the pelvis, that is the main blood source for our body, right? That's 100 to 200 Gs. So thinking of these aircraft traveling through the sky, that is a lot. Now, when we have total body fragmentation, sadly, like the Philly crash where there are pieces all over, how many Gs did that aircraft have to sustain for those bodies to break in those parts? 350. And you think, how did we ever get these numbers? This study came from a great book called Beyond the Black Box. The study was all different cadavers that are donated to science, and they literally put them on sleds and crash planes and threw them across the sky and the ground to figure out when body parts broke apart. So it gives us so much knowledge to think how much our bodies can take. But even if we don't see these injuries, what other injuries are living inside the pilot? So G-LOC is a G-induced loss of consciousness, something that can happen that deprives the brain of oxygen. I'm going to go ahead and play a video that shows some testing in the military. These were all voluntary that did this, and what happens when we pull so many Gs and we black out. And they try so hard to hold on. But this is what happens when there's G induced. So if we get into an uncontrolled spin and we pull excessive Gs, we do pass out in the flight deck. And it takes seconds to recover. So you can see finally, and she tries so hard. She's bearing down, trying to keep that blood to her system, but it's too much. And there she goes. So now she's not flying the aircraft. The aircraft has nobody controlling it. Now she wakes up and struggles, hitting everything and anything in between until she comes back and realizes, oh my God, I should be flying this airplane, right? And these people are probably phenomenal pilots. So to see that they are impacted by that, it gives us a lot of pause to consider what our pilots have been through as far as trauma when we see them on the ground. This study is very interesting, what differs between airplane, so fixed wing, and helicopter. And it does make sense. The way that an aircraft crashes, fractured ribs, right? We have yokes or sticks striking the torso area, liver lacerations, fractured larynx, which we'll talk about in the next slide, is very unique to fixed wing pilots. And a fractured larynx was observed in many cases, a finding that had not been reported in literature. So they were finding this and they went question mark, why? Now, helicopter specific, knowing the way that a helicopter could come down, not so much gliding, but straight down, we have the impact from the ground moving up, right? So those pressures move up. So of course we're going to see femoral leg injuries, rib injuries, brain and lung as that C-spine moves up to the brain of the patient. So knowing that the use of a shoulder harness has afforded protection as well. You'll see that as a last note because it keeps that helicopter pilot down in their seat. So some of those forces are mitigated. How are we fixing this in industry? Well, Cirrus actually has shock kind of resistant struts underneath like helicopters do now. So for the impact of that parachute to be on board, because it comes down like a helicopter now, not like an aircraft, they had to put shock absorbing struts underneath the seats. So it absorbs some of that energy to be able to protect the patient from that downward up position. Now the question you go, oh my God, what is this larynx thing she's talking about? It's right here on your neck. It's where you talk. It's where your voice comes from. But these larynx injuries were shown that as pilots crash, this happens to fracture. And it's because of the impact that the pilots take. And when we, as first responders, get these folks, the first thing we think is, let's get them in a C-collar. Now, each state is going to have a different C-collar protocol. So whatever your state SOP is, you're going to follow. But my advice is don't put them in a hard collar. If you are going to secure their neck, soft collar only. Because the worst thing we can do is elongate their neck, opening up that airway and bringing the fractured pieces of a larynx down into their airway, therefore compromising their airway or choking them. All things we need to consider, okay? Women with longer, slimmer necks are more predisposed to that injury. So our goal, manage the airway. Do not intubate these people. You will struggle to get your tube down their throat. We may need to crike or trach depending on what your protocol is, okay? So again, I'm giving you tools in your toolbox. I'm not telling you what to do, but I'm saying these are tools and things that we do recommend. Always consider rib injuries, internal injuries like soft organ, lung injuries, again, that impact. We talked about wrists and thumbs. Who was flying the aircraft? If I have a fractured thumb, chances are I was holding onto that yoke. And hemorrhage of the brain from all of that, the G-force moving up and having nowhere to go. Whiplash and coup contre coup is also very, very common in this. The other body's response to gravity is that the circulatory system is most affected by G-forces. So discrepancy is when the body kind of takes this perfusion, and as we get into that G-lock again, right, the body starts popping at all of your ends of your capillaries. So here we call them Geasels or G-measles, that the capillaries start rupturing. So people say it looks like these folks had a bright red rash. Now, if they're still alive, their body cleans this up rather quickly. So if while you land and you get to the wreck and you go, God, this guy was covered in all these little red dots, but now it's gone, tell us that, because that may say, hey, they had G-lock. Something happened up there where they pulled extensive G-forces, and that is going to affect how their injuries are going to be managed at the higher ER level. This is seen in not only military fighters, but also civilian aerobatic aviation. So all things that I want you guys to consider there. What am I missing, Dan? You're medical too. Did I get it all for that?
Yeah, and one thing that's unique with helicopters though is that rotor system, if the rotor system comes in contact with something and starts eating itself up, that cyclic control that's in between their legs starts thrashing around in the aircraft. So you'll have significant femoral arterial bruising, if not broken femurs. So it's just another consideration to think about.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
and usually their right thumb will be broken
In helicopters, right?
in helicopters,
In
correct?
helicopters, yes. And in same with pilots, in fixed wing aircraft, we see thumb fractures, but if we see dual, we know they held it all the way to the ground if it's a yoke, and we'll see snapped wrists if it is a side stick, any form of a joystick. Yep.
Uh,
And
Very
yes, he said right thumb. So what control are you holding with your right hand?
the cyclic that's in between your legs. So once that rotor system starts falling apart, the inherent response is to hold on to that flight control, and it's just too much. So a lot of times it'll break their thumb.
Thank you. This video I'm going to play, this is relatively new that it came to me. I think you guys are going to enjoy it, and Dan and I think, can both speak on it, but as a helicopter pilot, he can tell you a little more, so we'll watch it, and then we will go ahead and discuss what we see. And I'm sorry there's no sound on this one. There's a lot to unpack here, isn't there?
Yeah, there is.
So I'll let you start by saying what we suspect the accident was. What occurred him to get to the point where he started spinning around like this? What do we think this was?
Tail rotor.
Okay.
Something happened with his tail rotor, and his workload was high, that's for sure. Entering that auto rotation. So the whole purpose of the tail rotor is for counter rotation. And once you lose it, the helicopter wants to start spinning, and you see the yaw rate build, and he enters the auto rotation and has the impact. The one thing that I want to point out, we actually briefed on this at work the other day. Because some of our guys are wearing the tactical helmets in the back of the aircraft because they have better field of view, and they're great for when we're in that rescue profile and we're performing rescues. But then I encourage the guys that they when we're back into that aviation role and they're flying in the helicopter, to put their aviation helmet back on, because those aviation helmets have been tested and proven for that crash sequence and survival. So I'm convinced that this gentleman is alive today because he was wearing a helmet and not just a headset flying in the helicopter. But as you see at the end of the video, when he removes his helmet, he clearly had his bell rung, and you could see that there was a mental checklist occurring. And granted, those details of the checklist were a little jumbled and not necessarily in order because he's messing with his radio stack. So in his mind, he's thinking, I have to tell somebody that this happened. So he's looking at his radio. I wish we had the audio because you can hear the helicopter still running. And then he starts going through his shutdown sequence. So granted, things were a little jumbled and out of order, which is natural for going through a significant accident like that. But the process was there, and a lot of it was muscle memory, which is why we continue to train like we do. So you go from a known process through all the way through to that muscle memory. But yeah, it's amazing he survived that. That was pretty impressive.
Beyond amazing. And this brings us so much into this topic that I think we haven't touched on in our other sessions because of a video like this being so prominent. That helmet saved his life. We have seen survivors in crashes with helmets that have saved their life. So this is not just a helicopter thing. Our 44 pilots, right, our new students, they just buy headsets. They plug in their David Clark and they think it's fine. And I'm advocating to say I think all helicopter pilots to start with should be in helmets. When you purchase your new David Clarks, make it a helmet. Second,
Sure.
The glider community is also now wearing helmets because of so many accidents that can happen from the tow plane and obviously them not having an engine and doing their forced landings places. So these helmets really are great ideas. Nobody says you can't jump in your Cirrus and fly with a helmet, but we need to make sure, of course, it's safe. We can still operate all the controls, hear things with that. But to just know that this man, the way his head flopped around and smacked impact into that terrain, I believe that while he got a bump, he survived because of that. Other
Yeah.
medical things to look at here, though, are those legs. I cannot tell if that right leg is broken, but it's definitely pinned. And Dan and I kind of talked about this before we came on earlier. If he's moving it at first, so I know that he still has his circulatory motor system, but it appears, and I'm going to play that one section just back for you guys quickly after impact, so you can see his legs. So once the dust clears, he's moving them, so his circulatory motor system is working, but it seems broken because he's just not moving it enough, and he's pinned, like he can't get up and out of that seat. But remember the position he's laying in too. That helicopter's on its side in the terrain, right? So that I think is it. So, and as Dan said, you can see him kind of frantically just trying to reach for buttons and knobs. He's going through a checklist. He just doesn't know what with the disorientation.
So you brought up a couple of good points, and there's also some really good points in the chat right now. Daniel brought up he should have left his helmet on. Absolutely, the helicopter's still running. The violent motion has not stopped per se, so he still has to get out of there. So leaving that helmet installed because it still is an active safety device. So I completely agree. The other thing too, somebody brought up the co-pilot side seatbelts. The shoulder straps were not secured, and it actually smacked him. So, I mean, if he was just wearing a headset, that could have broke his orbital socket, or I mean, anything could have happened with that. Unsecured things in the aircraft. Everything should be secured and tied down at all times.
Absolutely. And same with the fire extinguisher. If that had broken free or wasn't secured, I mean, taking that to the head that would have probably been out for him.
Yeah.
Thankfully, he had a helmet on, but had he not. So it's just such a great capture of a video that I think evokes so many conversation pieces to look at this video and see what injuries. And knowing that, hey, if you get to this wreckage site and you see this helmet laying here, you might not think much of it, but he's disoriented. He may have an altered mental status. Chances are he's got a little TBI going on or a concussion at minimum. That was a violent reaction. So having that, I would also now be concerned about soft tissue internal injuries. I'd be looking at kidneys, back, or everything. But I do know at that position, he can still move his legs, which is awesome. And it means there is not paralysis because his legs and his arms are moving. So let's not move him and cause paralysis. Okay? Keep him in place until we can get him out properly.
Yep. And you also said one thing that I just want to extract before we move on. You said the aircraft is no longer right side up. So one thing that we have to remember when we respond to these incidents, that what's normally up is no longer right side up anymore. So the roof of the cabin can now becomes your floor. So when you're extricating these people, you have more snag hazards, you have more disorienting factors. So that's all the more reason to quell that human response, to get in and get it done as fast as possible, to calm down and understand that, hey, now we don't have this smooth surface to pull this person out, or the stable surface to be standing on inside the cabin of an aircraft to pull them out, because they're not designed to be walked on. They're not designed to be load bearing from the inside, if that makes sense.
Of course, and someone dropped a good point. Good thing there wasn't a fire. I mean, God forbid this bladder opened up on him and it caught. We could talk about this slide for 3 hours and we would all extract every teeny tiny little piece. And that's the best part about being an investigator, is being able to extract and say, how do we ever prevent this from happening again? What can we teach to our community? And if the one thing you take away from this is wear a helmet and secure that seatbelt, right, from flailing around, I think we've given you that. So we need to move on just for time, but I do think we could talk about this forever. Couple last things before we kick it off with our last case study is black boxes, aka flight recorders, CVRs, cockpit voice recorders, or flight data recorders, FDR, CVRs, are something we always look at for crashes. Most of your larger jets have this, and your airliners. They live in the tail. 99% of the time, they live in the tail. So where the wreckage normally survives, we would locate these. They look orange or red in color. They can be burned and crumpled, but inside the canister that records the words should be intact. Anytime you see this, immediately call attention to the FAA or the NTSB or quarantine it immediately. Salvage that. This tells us so many incredible things when we get it. Just a couple of slides just to take a look. What am I thinking about here? Nighttime, the propeller was spinning. That's how it's curled out. The propeller's right there. So if people are egressing, let's make sure that that prop is secure so nobody backs up into it, just in case the magneto accidentally fires. And be sure that that runway is closed. Even though it might be closed by the tower, other pilots may not read their NOTAMs or their weather, and they may land on top of you. So be vigilant. Be very, very vigilant. Make the scene light and bright and loud. Put lots of flashing lights there, so hopefully a pilot won't land on top of your head. This is just a crash, not a pretty one, but thing takeaway here is they did end up cutting the top of the fuselage. Might not be the best idea if there was a ballistic rocket system, because they would have cut right through that wire and activated the system. But that was a truck versus airplane. I'll let you hit up this for search and rescue quickly. There's only 3 slides on it.
Yeah, so drones, as wonderful of a tool as they are, we have had to shut operations down because of drone activity. You can see the damage on those aircraft there. They don't integrate with general aviation very well. Professional drone organizations are doing a wonderful job of notifying us when they are conducting operations. And the FAA's DRODM system is actually a very, very good tool. So when you're looking at your NOTAMs, you can also click a tab that says DRODMs and see on the graphical map, see the actual drone operations that are approved in your area. During our massive wildfires that we had last January, we actually had to shut operations down because one of our Super Scooper airplanes that are on contract from Canada actually hit a drone and put a hole in their wing. So there were kids down on Pacific Coast Highway that the residents were paying them to fly their drones up to see if their house had survived because the residents weren't allowed in. So I understand the spirit of the intent. You know, it was good natured intent, but it did shut down operations, and they are a hazard to what we're trying to do as public servants. There you go. If you fly, we can't.
So call the rock.
Yeah. Drone accident response, we talked earlier, they are using them in agriculture now for spraying. So they'll have spray kits, they can carry a payload. So you just never know what you're going to get with a drone incident. So they're unmanned. If there's no impact to human life, then just rope the area off and then let the professionals come in and deal with it and manage it. And don't try to catch them if they're coming down, because we've had people lose their fingers from trying to catch drones.
Yeah, don't do that. That's never good. And briefly, the commercial space accident. If you live in a district where there is commercial space, they are still considered FAA monitored until they enter 60,000 feet and they enter the atmosphere for space. So if these guys do end up coming down, stay away from the debris. Sometimes there is, I would say, hazmats on there we might not be familiar with, or materials you may not know how to manage. Limit anybody near the debris, secure that site. If you are near a company, SpaceX or any of the other ones, you are more than welcome to, as a fire department, to reach out and ask about those rockets that are being deployed in your area. If you live in Florida or Boca Chica, Texas, just talk to them and say, what should we be worried about if it leaves your protective zone and enters ours? They're more than happy to share their emergency data with you. I do have a little card that, of course, I'm going to send out to you that has points on this, but most ships do have placards describing the egress points. Life-saving efforts, try your best. On the outside of these vessels, there is actually directions on how to open those pods up to get folks out. And if it is simply just a cargo ship, leave it until the FAA and the NTSB arrive. In this case, the FAA owns it, not the NTSB. So it's a little bit of a shift when we get to this private space flight. And if astronauts are present, just perform normal operations of rescue. Do what you need to do to save those astronauts and bring them to a safe space. With that being said, we are going to kind of bring the class to the final case study presented by Dan. I am going to let you take it away.
All right, so this case study, this occurred back in March of 2022. If there's any LA County sheriffs in the room, this is not, by no means, this is not a hit piece on the sheriff's department. This is just it was a joint response, and just a very, very good example of an aircraft response to an aircraft accident. The one thing I do want to discuss real quick is Mr. Parker asked a question about the human factor aspect of responding to an incident. In this case study, the fire department was on scene dealing with a BLS, or a basic life support operation standard. The patient actually went against medical advice and was basically just uninjured. So they were closing out their incident, and then an aircraft crash happened. Now, granted, these gentlemen that were on scene, they're professionals and they deal with this stuff, and they've already bred that fight or flight out of their system. But it is human nature to have that parasympathetic response to chaos. And so it's how you manage it and how you address it is what determines the success of the incident. Yes, an aircraft just crashed right in front of me. No one knows how they're going to respond to it until they're put in that situation. So the only way to prepare yourself mentally for that incident is to expose yourself to the factors around it. So I encourage people to go to boneyards and look at wrecked aircraft to just see the mangled metal, and put your head in that space and understand that, hey, these aren't the pristine aircraft that I'm used to seeing on a flight line, to where you can imagine and picture the extrication of people out of it. And on one of the exercises, the phase 2s that Melanie and I ran, there was an actual fuselage, or excuse me, a flight deck that was there that had been wrecked, and we actually had the people crawl through it. And so their shirts were snagging on the sharp metal, and they were actually inside of it, crawling through it. And we're going, okay, and we're telling them, hey, imagine trying to pull this crew out of this wreckage. So that's the only way that I could condition someone, or recommend conditioning for that, because there is a little bit of mental exercise that has to be done to prepare yourself for it. I know for a fact Melanie has seen way more chaos in terms of accident response than probably anyone I know, but there is just no way to combat that human factor without doing some mental gymnastics to try to wrap your head around it. So with that, so on this particular day, they had a flight doc, 2 paramedics, which are tactical medics. They're actually SWAT guys. They use a different term for SWAT, but and then they had a physician on board as a ride along.
You ready for the video?
Yep.
We begin here at 7 o'clock with breaking news. An LA County Sheriff's Department helicopter with 5 people on board crashed this evening off Highway 39 and East Fork Road, north of Azusa in the Angeles National Forest. Air 7 HD was live over the scene just moments ago to get you this video. Good evening, I'm Jory Rand. This is Eyewitness News on KDOC TV, LA's only live local newscast at 7 p.m. That helicopter crashed after responding to an automobile accident in that area. We're still waiting reasons for why this helicopter went down. But
So you can go to the next slide.
Okay.
Yep. So what happened? There was a single vehicle, part of our over the side response in the Angeles National Forest. Cars go off cliffs all the time there. So you get a traditional traffic collision response, and then you get a USAR team, which is the Urban Search and Rescue folks, because they have all they can set up a rope system to get down to the victim, and then a helicopter is usually attached to it. So based on that pattern of life, or that typical response package, Air 5 had been left off the response. And without hearing the details of why they were left off it, because the vehicle hadn't gone off the cliff, it just kind of went off the side. So it was still accessible. They added themselves as part of that traditional package. So we can go to the next slide.
You ready for the video?
Yep. And so in this video, before we start it, they're interviewing the crew. And for the first responders, the professional first responders that are in the room, I just want you to take note on how calm, clear, and concise the captain was in initiating the appropriate response for a downed aircraft, and then listen to the crew and the considerations that they were talking about. All of this higher level stuff that was going through their minds as they reacted to this incident.
Ready?
Yep.
Holy shit! Oh my god! What happened? Holy shit! Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god!
So it was a pretty typical canyon response for us. It was a TC trapped up the canyon. We didn't have much info besides that.
So once we pulled up on scene, there were no victims trapped.
Found one vehicle on the side of the mountain and two patients.
While we were en route, Air 5 added themselves to our ticket.
Our ground units are advising of a rollover TC versus trapped Highway 39 at East Fork. We're going to start heading that way.
As they were coming in, apparently they browned out and had a main rotor strike on an oak tree, which caused a crash.
I was going to take my patrol and drive up canyon to pick Air 5 up where we're standing right now. And as I was getting ready to leave that initial accident scene,
Just heard a strange sound, which didn't sound right, and then I heard on the TAC radio from the force right away. And we knew something bad happened.
You could hear booms all day up in this canyon, and it travels, so you wouldn't know what it was anyway until somebody goes, hey, you know, there's a helicopter that crashed up there. You're like, what? I don't know about that.
the downwash from the rotor system causes what we call a brownout, and all the dirt and dust come up and basically envelop the entire visual space of the copter. The main rotor system clipped the top of the oak tree. The helicopter came down and rolled onto its side.
So I jumped on the running board of the patrol.
And he said, I need a medic. We weren't really sure why. And so my partner, because I was tied into patient care, left me some of the equipment and then hopped in the patrol.
The debris field was huge. It was probably 200 feet in all directions. The rotor was stuck up on the cliff.
There were several people outside of the helicopter standing around dazed.
After we kind of realized what we had, I went back. The engine had just pulled up. Dave had pulled up in the engine, so I jumped in the captain's seat and just took a breath, put on the headset, and then gave the report to LA.
RF-25 has crashed upon landing. We have 3 medics trapped in the aircraft. No fire. Go ahead and start an appropriate response.
The tail boom section was off to this end. The initial thought was it could slide off, and it's 200 plus feet down to the bottom of that canyon. The engines were on the ground in this area, just below the main rotor head, and there was dry grass on the ground at the time, so the heat of the engine plus I'm assuming the fuel and oils had a smoldering fire on the ground, and that was also contributing to the smoke inside the cabin cockpit area of the helicopter. And I know we don't have Class B foam, but I was like, something's better than nothing. So I pulled a reel line, and I ended up just staging it on the ground next to the copter.
Were they close to going over? Because if we're working on a helicopter, will it roll over?
The main rotor system had wedged itself somewhere in this area, and that was the only thing keeping it up from going all the way to the bottom.
I knew the fuel would still be on, so I went to the fuel shutoffs and I went to the battery bus. So everything isn't straight up, it's upside down.
Seconds were going by, I was trying to process how am I going to make access to these guys inside.
The right front pilot, his seatbelt sheared off, and he hit the other pilot in the side of his face, knocking him out. So when we first arrived on scene, they were both unconscious.
At that time, I hadn't realized that Jackson had made access from the front of the copter on the other side of the oak tree, had come up and gone inside the rear part of the cockpit. He popped his head up when I got by the main rotor system, and he said, I can't breathe because it had all been charged with like smoke. So I'm thinking in my mind, let me get 2 BAs, one for the patient and one for Jackson, so we can work on that.
Aaron was working on the the cockpit door, trying to make entry into that.
They were both unconscious at the time. Just started cutting their seatbelts. We had to secure their weapons. And once we got their weapons secured and detangled them from the seatbelts, we started to make a move. Jackson was on air behind me because the smoke was still in the back half of that cockpit area. I was able to lift the guy by his vest, pick him up, and basically pass him off to Buddy, and there was several other individuals out there at that time.
These were dead weight guys that were having trouble getting out. And having a guy like Aaron that is just all bulk, being able to lift someone out of a copter is huge.
It wasn't something we were responding to. It was something that happened on the incident. It was an IWI. It was just like having one of our copters crash, because we do have a relationship with him, and we do work with him on a day-to-day basis.
The guy was hilarious. I've been on a lot of calls up here with him. I didn't know who he was until we actually got him out. And once I found out who he was, it hit me kind of hard because I worked with him so much.
It's not every day you come across the Air 5 with guys you work with every day, you know, smashed up on the side of a mountain.
Chris, Captain Dubois, did a fantastic job on the radio. We didn't need any guidance. He's just like, hey, here's what the job is, go for it.
There were no orders given. Everybody had a job. They knew what their job was, and everybody just went to work and made it happen. So I didn't really have a job per se.
It was a fantastic crew that day, and I'm glad we had them there.
And we kind of show up every day just ready to go to work and use the skills that we were given, the talents that we were given. And on that day, each talent was in the right place.
So just to note, the all crew members did survive. So let's unpack some facts. They headed that way. One of the firefighters, you heard him mention the smoke in the cabin. He actually mentioned it a few times. But taking it back to that discussion about halon, there actually was no fire. The smoldering was just from the engine laying there, and it kind of just did singe some grass. But what they're experiencing was that halon, because there is a G switch. So at certain G forces, those fire bottles will automatically discharge. And so that's one thing to consider when you're responding to these, that halon will present as smoke. Either way, it is still a respiratory hazard. So instantly I'm automatically thinking ventilation and breathers. So you gear up, and then as that smoke clears out and the operation progresses, you can start retrograding those protections appropriately. They were trying to figure out how to get them out. We talked about it in the previous case study, where right side up is no longer right side up, it's upside down. And so things are disorienting, and trying to figure out how to unpack these people from inside that aircraft is definitely the problem you're being presented and you have to solve. The seatbelt broke. We'll talk about that here in a moment. And the crew members in the back, they typically, because they're a tactical platform, much of the time, they don't wear seatbelts. They wear a tether inside the aircraft. That to include the ride-along doctor was not in a seat. So he was actually thrown up against the back of the cabin to where they have all their rescue adjuncts, which are soft bags. And so that cushioned the impact, and he just held on to those and went for a ride. You can go to the next slide.
Okay.
That's the car that they were responding to. So not a lot of mechanism there. The vehicle just went off the road and kind of off the side. Fortunately, it didn't go off the cliff down 200 feet down into the water. So very survivable accident. The patient actually ended up walking away, and he was actually in one of our patrol vehicles going downhill to go meet the ambulance for one final assessment before getting released. Next slide. So as we look at these pictures, I want you to imagine being the first on this scene. If that happened and you were just standing on the side of the road, taking in the view of the lake, and this is what you're presented with, by the grace that oak tree was there. The oak tree is what caused the accident, to be honest with you, but that oak tree is what prevented them from going over the side all the way down off that cliff. Now the aircraft's resting on its side. I don't know, I can't ascertain the stability of that fuselage right now. So I'm going to think twice about climbing on top of it. But there's twisted steel and all kinds of metal and hazards and everything all around this thing. And how are we going to get on top of that and start solving this problem? So you can go to the next slide. This seatbelt broke. So these are those little nuggets that we present to the FAA. So this is definitely something that Melanie and her team are interested in, especially as a first responder. When you get there and you say, man, the one pilot was laying on top of the other pilot. Well, how did that happen? Well, it looked like the seatbelt was broken. Well, that's a clue to them. That light bulb goes off and then they're going to hone in on that and they're going to run it to ground. And since then, we've actually found that they put out a message. The manufacturer of that aircraft put out a message and they've been replacing these, but these seatbelt retainers are still in use in some of their older airframes. So all of this data is what arms the FAA with implementing those controls and changing policy and putting leverage and turning the pressure on to manufacturers to improve their product for survivability.
And a quick note on survivability, when I contacted Autoflug about this part and got some information, they stated that the pilot fits in the parameters of what we consider an average male, 180 pounds, and that's how much G-force and pressure they secured. We know that the pilot of this was well over that weight at the time, so 180 pounds is what this was tested at with barely any room for error. So that's just a side note, and very disappointing to get that information during the investigation.
But that's extremely disappointing because it's not 1942 anymore. You know, the
Thank you.
average human is definitely changed.
Agree.
So yeah, this is just a graphic showing that 220-foot drop from that landing zone that they attempted to land in.
And that drop area.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I know that we're going to go just a couple minutes over, so please just hang in there. I'm getting there. So what we've discussed today is all of these items. I won't reread them to you, but hopefully you're walking away with a nugget. There were so many great comments in here, so many things I wish we could get to and talk about, but this training would become 10 hours. In fact, someday I hope to teach this class for a whole program for a college, so who knows? But I know there's so much to discuss and so much more you want to know. In order to make this class happen again and for us to get it, please scan this QR code. Please fill out the survey for us. Tell us what you loved. Tell us what you hated. Tell us what you want to see in phase 3. Okay. We will also, if you email us, set up visits to help get you a phase 2, which is the in-person one where we can set up that event like Pat Ryan was talking about, where we can get airplanes and volunteers and you can touch and feel and look at these parts and planes and helicopters. So scan this. We're going to have it at the end as well. I'm going to open up to any questions. Anyone that needs to go, you are more than welcome to leave. Anyone who wants to stay, we'll stay open for about 10-15 more minutes to get these questions. If you are joining us in a group, scan this or email me. I need the emails and complete name of every person that joined you so they can get CEU credit. So make sure you provide me a group roster. So here's a scan code. And again, I will be able to get that. This picture here is the one with Carl the dog. So you can see it's stuck in the oyster beds. And I'll leave this screen up as we talk. So the survey on the left, the group roster on the right, my email, Dan's email, reach out to us. Thank you to all of our panelists that have answered the questions while Dan and I were trying to get through 4 hours of data. What are you seeing, Dan? Any other questions I'm missing out on?
I'm looking now.
Right, so there's a couple in here. Q&A for pilots, what should really be in a first aid kit? Those that have band-aids, yeah, they're pretty crappy. So quick things, I would think definitely quick clot is awesome if you can. Tourniquets for sure. You know, a CPR mask is always not a bad idea, the shield. But I encourage you to have any medications that you might need in there. So anything that you may need as far as insulin or epinephrine, Narcan is an option, I guess. But I would think anything that you feel in the woods. Seeking out a wilderness survival class is always a great idea. So any pilots that are in remote rural areas where they may have to do a forced landing, think about where you might have to live for the night or a couple days. So I'm going to go ahead and close that question. Let's see. If the seatbelt is too strong, won't it break bones in an accident? Yes and no. It all depends, but it definitely keeps the body secured to the seat, and we don't have anybody who gets ejected out of the aircraft. Yes, if Zoom dropped out for a little bit, you get leeway. I will look through everything, so you'll still get credit for the course. What in-cabin tools are the best? Seatbelt cutter, fire extinguisher. Yeah, obviously fire extinguisher is a great one. Halon, halots are good. Seatbelt cutters, yeah, I think that that is definitely an option. And tourniquets, always tourniquets. So we'll close out that one. Can we mention the timeline for head trauma? I'm not going to go into too much medical for that. I don't want to give too much information on that because this isn't an EMSI class. I still have to work within the parameters of being a pilot. Oh, again, state the name of the website to view wreckage. I don't think that we gave that link. Somebody may have posted it in chat, but can you state the name? Really, you can just call up insurance companies, aviation insurance companies, and they'll be able to provide you where wreckage might be stored to salvage. That's one. Anything you see you want to answer, Dan?
Yeah, so Gary was asking about small fire departments, local fire departments participating in the training. That it's whenever these are hosted, they're open to everyone. So we've had entire classrooms full of firefighters attending these trainings.
Yeah, and Gary, I think you're one of my reps now. But Gary, if that's you, yes, we will be doing one in the New England area here, the Boston area. So probably somewhere in Massachusetts, Rhode Island. We've had a lot of offers for folks, so we do have a little bit of opportunity here. I just can't say about across the country yet because we don't have a CR with a budget yet because our administration hasn't opened that up. So I can't say where we might be taking it. If you guys are popping in your emails or anything in chat, I won't be able to get to all that. So email me if you have a specific question. What role do you think CERT can play in aviation? Great, that's community. So you guys are able to do search and rescue. You are able to set up community I guess like almost like Red Cross things to help responders that are out there looking. We definitely love it crashes when the Red Cross van shows up. They provide us kind of hand warmers. They provide us hot chocolate, water, all things to keep your responders during a very heavy response going and active. So anything you can do would be awesome. Yes, the link with aircraft floor plans, I am going to send that. Please give me up to 14 days to do the CEU credits. That's just because all of those are pretty much hand typed and separated. So you have to give me time, but I will include it in. You should get your wings credit a lot quicker than that though. Your wings credit will be fast. Your CEUs will be as fast as I can work. Thank you, George. Thank you, George, for inviting your local fire department. There's a lot of stuff I just can't answer on a wing there. But I think pretty good. So if you guys want, you can go ahead and start dropping off. And then just last, if panelists, if you want to come on quickly, we'll just do our quick debrief as people are kind of launching off the site.
Okay, this is Pat. Sorry about that. Hey, Melanie, I was prepping for an infomercial on the UAS Christmas special presentation on UAS. That wound up being in the chat. So for those that saw that, feel free to join us. We've invited Melanie to partake in that and from the Boston region. So we're trying to do a special UAS do's and don'ts and regulatory requirements. So if you can join us, please do. That was in the chat. And if anybody has my email address, I'll put it in there one more time real quick. And if you have any questions, I can send you the link. And it's next Wednesday, December 17th at 1 p.m. Registration is required. Other than that, there will be no announcement in spans for that one. It will be just strictly flyer / an email. So feel free to join us. Thanks a lot.
Awesome. And I do see that there's a hand raised. Mike Armin, I can't open up the mic. It's not going to let me. So you're going to have to put your question in the Q&A if you have one or chat. And anyone that, if you're not signing into your Zoom account, I see your name is like Dylan Garside. That is being recorded. So if you feel that for some reason your email is not accurate, just email me, scan what's on the screen, melanie.a.pulsate.faa.gov, and you will get credit. So if you're here and Zoom is logging you, that's how we get all your things. So Zoom is pretty cool. It does it for us. Yes, you will get an email about the CEUs, but again, give me at least 14 days to work through that. You might get it in a day, you might get it in 14, but again, I can only work so fast. Okay, so lastly, my panelists that are on, thank you so much for helping today. Dan, excellent job. What is your feedback? What could we do? Kick off for the next time?
Just a couple of slide changes. I'll talk to you offline about that.
Okay.
But yeah, I actually was writing down a bunch of notes. A lot of the people in the comments had some really good tips or topic enhancers, if you will. Yeah. Other than that, I think it went relatively well. Few things I forgot, but well, it's been a
It's
while since
4
we
hours.
taught
I
this
think you
one.
did great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I also want to take a second and wish the birthday boy a happy birthday.
Oh, geez. Not necessary. Thank you. I appreciate that. In any event, good job, Melanie and Dan. Really appreciate you putting this on and making it available for so many people. So again, kudos.
Thank you. Well, we hope to do it again. Again, after all I have so much going on, but April, May timeframe is nice because then it'll pop into the phase twos once we start getting that done. And I'm sure you'll be fielding some calls for that, Pat. How about Jim Logie? And do you have any comments, corrections, changes, anything?
I thought it was very good. It's the first time I've sat in on one of these as a panelist. So it was kind of a different perspective. I saw something in the chat, and I responded to the person. The comment was regarding not locking his baggage compartment door. And he said, after this, and I replied, I said, please reach out to Melanie because that could be aircraft specific. There's a requirement on a Piper Navajo to lock the nose baggage compartment because in the event it comes open in flight, it's unrecoverable.
Mm-hmm.
So that's I thought that was an interesting comment from what somebody gleaned.
For sure, someone that has that available. And again, everything we say is like a tool to put in the tool bag. It's not definite, right? If it applies to your plane, if it doesn't. But in the event that we have seen people get out through the baggage door of Pipers, it was essential that it was unlocked because you can't unlock it from the inside. So if it's required for their aircraft for safe flight, then of course we're going to follow that. So that's really good feedback and something that I'm going to make note of and probably feed into our next training session.
Yeah, and perhaps maybe the tickler was aircraft specific, like in the case of the Canadair, yes, you can exit on some of the depending on the configuration, some of the Gulfstreams, the G2s and G3s, you could get from the lavatory back through the into the baggage compartment. Getting the door open may have been a different situation, but nonetheless, yeah. So I get people need to think it through before they, the proverbial forest through the trees.
Yeah. Well, that's why the pre-planning, right? Do it before you
Yeah.
actually have the accident. If I were to crash right now, what would I do? So I think that
Yeah.
is important. And I'll tell you, Jim,
But-
we could teach this class for 10 hours and still not have enough to say.
No, and I think it really was a great experience. I can't believe anybody would not have gotten something somewhere out of it.
Agree.
So,
Thank you. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Eric, you're next on my list. Do you have any feedback for us?
Nope, I don't have any feedback for you. Great job, Melanie and Dan. A lot of good information, a lot of positive comments in the chat. So it was really good to see that. Got a lot of questions. No feedback from me, but thank you for inviting me as a panelist.
Thank you so much for coming. I know you've had a busy day too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Next up down my list is Zach. Hey, Zach, what do you got for us?
Hey. No, I thought once again you guys did a great job. Sharing the presentation. I try to stay up on the questions as much as possible, but they just kept flowing in so quickly. I was like, we'll get to them live at some point. But no, it was fun to be able to participate and then try to help people with various things along the way. But if you could do me a favor and just rewind one slide to the summary so I can snap a picture of it, that would be awesome.
There you go.
Yeah, right there. Cool. For the activity and all. But
Yes, yes.
no, I think it was great. I mean, we've already got a couple folks emailing requesting some additional information. So
Wonderful.
it's a great way to prime the pump and get people interested in doing more in-person stuff and because I think a lot of time people don't really understand what they're missing until they actually get in front of it and start to see the amount of information available to them. So it really gets people excited, and it does make our job a little bit easier doing the outreach where we're not trying to like beg people to participate or try to make time in their schedule. They actually want to participate and they actually want to make time in their schedule to do these things once they kind of get in front of it a little bit. So I really appreciate that you guys put it on, and it helps prime the pump for everybody, I think. So that's awesome.
Thank you so much. I think that is great feedback. And I could say that, Dan and I get numerous requests. I mean, this is probably the most begged for class. When are you doing it? When are you running it? And even though we saw about just under 700 people on here at one time, there was one group that was filling a town hall with people. So I am excited to see when those rosters come in. I'm going to be populating. I think we'll probably be in the upwards of at least 800 plus for this training. So next time, I think we probably should consider getting the 3,000 seat license to fill it.
Yeah.
I was like, well, we usually do 1,000, but we did well and very well timed, Dan. I think that we kept on. I would like to remove some of the slides that we brushed through. Some of them they seem like they're aging out, and I'd like to update a couple of the pictures. So just our continuous improvement for the 2026 version.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, we're good. But otherwise, that's it. I think that we got most of the comments here. I will manage everything on the tail end of it as far as sending out the CEUs. The survey questionnaire will be out there again, but we'll get that, and I'll give you guys the rundown of how many people in the end participated, so you can put that in your counts for your area. Okay.
Cool. Thank you.
Anything else before I end the entire webinar?
Nothing.
Not yet. All
Great
right.
job. Thank you to everyone.
Oh, thank you so
Much
much.
appreciated.
And we'll chat afterwards, Dan, at maybe tomorrow. Go get some food and see your fam.
All right. No one's here, so I'm
Yeah.
good.
Oh, I'll see the dog. I don't know.
Yeah.
But we'll go offline and talk about things to change in the slides for the next one. But we have time for it, right? I don't want to do until April or May. We just need to give some time to get this to build back up.
Okay.
You guys have a.
You want to do it next week, like Friday or something before Christmas, right?
Right.
Yeah, that'll go over well.
You just think.
Hey,
no, go ahead.
I'll chat with you tomorrow.
Yeah, definitely. Enjoy the rest of your birthday. I'll see you guys later.
Take care. Bye-bye.
All right. See you, everybody.